Yes. Hello, my beautiful friends, and welcome back. We have a tremendous live stream planned this evening. The bombshell of the day is Anthony Fauci's diary is now public, so we can peruse inside and see what a lunatic sociopath he actually is and was back during his so-called stewardship of the great pandemic that wrecked the country and the world. So we'll go through it. And what's curious about this is even some people who were staunch defenders of Fauci are now saying that they have a little bit of concern about what they see inside because he was lying. He was saying one thing behind closed doors and another thing out to the public. And now all of this is in anticipation of Fauci's new haul into Congress. Rand Paul is going to be bringing him in on Wednesday. We are planning on covering that live. Hopefully you can join us bright and early, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time, presuming we don't have a new little baby who's here. But it's going to be a bombshell because we want to see whether or not Fauci commits new crimes that are not covered by that previous pardon. And so a lot of reaction to that story. We'll go through it and we'll see what some of the consequences might be for him before we turn our attention over to a new deportation surge that is now underway. CBS News got their hands on some documents saying that Homeland is now preparing to remove the Haitians. Their TPS status has been canceled and the expiration date is today. And so now what happens next will remain to be seen. But according to internal sources, they're preparing to send them back home. It's temporary for a reason. And we got some good stories around that. Trump is also now changing some rules that are causing a meltdown in the immigration lobby. They really are unhappy with the fact that they're going to be accelerating the process. All of these checks and balances, all of the rights that non-citizens who come in here get are now being closed off and closed down. And so we'll take a look at the new rule change that has been submitted. And then lastly, we have Xavier Becerra. You know him. He's running for governor out there in California. And we learned a long time ago that there were hundreds of thousands of missing children that Biden lost, still over 100,000 of them that are still missing. And we have a whistleblower who came out and is saying that Xavier is the person behind it. He basically eviscerated the vetting rules. And they were just handing out kids. You just show up. You're like, hi, I'd like a couple of 14-year-old girls, please. They're like, sure. You're going to give them a good home? Yeah, of course we will. Yeah, si, senor, definitely. And then, of course, kids are gone. And we've got a lot of problems now for the Xavier campaign out there in California. So it's going to be a great and tremendous stream today. Yeah, just tell Alexis to hold it. Just hold on to the baby. We've got a Fauci congressional deposition going on. So we'll see. I think we're ready for that baby to come out. So I don't know if that baby will wait for Fauci, but hilarious. But all right, so it's going to be a beautiful stream. Thank you for being here. Let's confirm that the tubes are warmed up. And then we'll jump into the meat and potatoes here because we've got some good stuff to get to here today. It looks like we're coming in loud and clear. Thank you for subscribing, liking the video, and all the things. Now, let's get right to it because we got some interesting things that are happening. And let's start right here. Anthony Fauci in big trouble. More evidence continues to come out that he's a liar and a sociopath, somebody who was saying one thing to the public and another thing behind closed doors. And now he's going to be hauled back into Congress. Rand Paul is confirming for us that when he comes back to testify, his pardon will only cover conduct that precedes the pardon. Biden just wiped the slate clean for America's scientist, a guy who, according to him, did nothing wrong. And if he lies again, that will be outside of the pardon. And what's curious about this is Rand seemingly has gobs of evidence against him that he has released, including his diary. And so we're going to go through these. We've got entries from 2019 to 2022 showing the extent of these lies. And each one of these things, I'm presuming, will be brought up and Fauci will be asked about it. And if he's not honest this time, or if he is asked a question and lies about some other evidence that Rand has not made public, so in other words, Fauci does not know that he'll be caught in a lie, then that will be a new crime, a new problem for him, lying to Congress. And so we're excited about this. But a lot of people who used to be staunch allies of Fauci are very, let's say, disappointed, disconcerted with what they've read inside of his diary, these emails that he was sending to himself, where he was explaining kind of his internal stream of consciousness. And this guy, of course, was a former FDA advisor, Dr. Scott Gottlieb. You remember that name, over on with Squawk Box. And he was asked about this point blank, saying, you read these emails. You were here all over the media for years telling us how amazing he was and how he's such an honorable and heroic person. What do you think now that you get to see what he's actually said? And of course, we're going to zoom into those emails and those diary entries in just a moment. But here's a little bit of the awkwardness that was going on with some of Fauci's top defenders.
How about your buddy, your buddy Fauci that I've asked you about in the past? You've defended him quite a bit.
Look, I mean, I don't know what you're referring to in terms of defending him.
I've asked him about whether he orchestrated a cover-up of the lab origin because of his involvement in making gain-of-function research possible again in China, which he did. He knew that would come back to haunt him, and then basically told his colleagues, go with the natural origin. It was obvious 3 years ago, Scott, to me anyway, and everybody else, that he orchestrated that.
It was obvious.
Yeah, look, we've talked about this in a show. I think the evidence in terms of whether this was human or naturally derived, I think the side of the ledger that speaks to this potentially coming out of a lab has grown over time. And we haven't had any new evidence suggesting that this came out of a natural origin or spillover.
The latest stuff that came out about him,
it was disappointing.
Didn't he know that it was likely it was from the lab and go to great lengths and tell people to destroy emails?
Well, look, and I've looked through the emails, some of them that have been online. I think it's disappointing to see him trying to suppress alternative opinions, and that clearly was evidence from the emails. I thought it was disappointing. The part of it that also disappointed me was how much he enjoyed the media associated with the event and his own appearances. I think a lot of us went on the media out of a sense of obligation. It was a hard time for all of us. I know it was a hard time for you. I think a lot of us felt an obligation to inform the public, and it wasn't particularly enjoyable. I mean, I got a lot of threats. Others did associated with that. And so to see those emails where he is evidencing some pleasure in the notoriety he achieved, that's disappointing.
It's not just, it's just outrageous if you read the diary entries. It's tough to take.
He didn't expect it. I don't know how he was speaking to his own diary.
Does having a reputation totally in the toilet at 85 years, does that hold him to account for what he was responsible for?
No.
The Tony Fauci I saw in those emails is not the Tony Fauci I knew over the years. I mean, he was a guy who was sober, who was careful about his public appearances and his statements, was always very thoughtful.
Did you figure out the obsession with mainstream media in defending him, and Jake Tapper having multiple dinners and best friends, and what did that come from? And I know people around here that would call Tony Fauci a hero.
Yeah, I can't dissect.
You don't know why.
How people perceived. I think different people had different emotions around
mask, shut down, the whole.
It was a difficult time, Joe, as you know very well, and I think people were looking for a voice that they can cling to. Maybe they.
I am science. That's why people don't like me. I mean, that was. You're very guarded and nice.
I was disappointed by the emails, I have to admit.
Well, we'll see what happens on Wednesday. Rand Paul's been right all along.
Look, he's held these. I suspect that Senator Paul held on to these emails and had them for a while and dropped them now ahead of this hearing. And, Tony's going to have to speak to what's in those private communications.
Yeah, of course he did. He's now unleashing the motherlode of evidence against Fauci. And this is an indictment against them. Anybody in the media, of course, we have our suspicions as to why Jake Tapper got his pom-poms out and was doing the Macarena, all the nurses dancing around, skipping on one leg, Fauci, the science, hey, we love the vaccine, and going nuts repeatedly, but the media may or may not have been just getting paid off by the big pharma companies. Every other commercial was brought to you by Pfizer, constantly on CNN and many of the others. And so maybe that was enough. Maybe it was the fact that it's just kind of a herd ideology. They all just bundle themselves into one ideologue person who is leading them through the madness in the wilderness. But it's bad judgment, if not worse than that. It might just be outright corruption. But they were all complicit in it. And then it's the same excuse that we hear every single time, just like with Bang Bang Swalwell, the other gubernatorial candidate out there in California, where they were saying, it's not the guy I know. No idea that he was like this. Totally blew my mind. I knew a different person. Whatever. We all know it. We could all see it. It was right in our faces, and they called us conspiracy theorists. They censored us, and they said that we are like troglodytes. We're not trusting the science. We should trust the science repeatedly, even though the science was all perverted and politicized, and now they just really, can't admit it other than coming out and saying he was disappointed. So the truth is, Fauci's a liar, and in one of his diary entries, he said something like this, clipped over and pulled from Tom S. Elliott, who put together a great couple of roundups on this at Tom S. Elliott on X. He said in one entry, quote, this is Fauci writing, I spoke with Bill de Blasio, mayor, New York City. And you remember de Blasio, he was the guy who came out and was stuffing his disgusting face with cheeseburgers and French fries. And he was like, hey, poor people, if you want to have a meal, you're going to go take this pharmaceutical and shove it into your body, and then we'll give you some French fries. And people are like, okay, I guess so. And he says, Fauci, I convinced him, based on what I was saying publicly in my conversation tonight, to literally close the New York City schools. Close the schools, in his words. He had already decided based on what I was saying on TV. So I'm responsible for this. He wasn't coming to this on his own. I went on to tell him he should close the bars and restaurants in New York City. He said that he would base this on my recommendation. Wow. I had a similar call with Ann O'Leary, the chief of staff for Newsom out in California. Ann said that based on my TV appearances today and yesterday, the governor has decided to close the schools in California, as well as the bars and restaurants. When I left the White House and crossed Pennsylvania and 17th Street, several cars honked their horns and shouted, thank you, out the window. Thank you, Fauci. And of course, of all people who were potentially at risk of COVID, the consensus was that the kids were not it. They were not in that category. And so closing the schools down just kind of really exacerbated all of the problems, not to mention stealing literal years from children, many of whom still can't read, still can't math, because they were sitting there on Zoom meetings trying to learn something from a teacher squirming out of their seats, having years of their lives ripped and stolen away from them, and then devastating households in the process. Now, that's a lie, because what Fauci said in the aftermath of COVID, when he was making the media rounds, this clip came out later, and he said, I didn't recommend locking down anything. I didn't do what you're saying I did. It wasn't me. It was the governor's decision, even though his diary entry says that they were literally following his recommendations. He was the person who was advising them to do this.
I wonder if you would recommend locking down schools if you had to do it all over again.
Well, again, it's first of all, I didn't recommend locking anything
Liar.
down. You're asking me questions. You're talking about the CDC is the public health agency that uses their epidemiologists and their science-based approach to make recommendations.
Okay, I didn't lock down anything. If you think that's just an aberration, here's another one.
I had nothing to do. Let's get down to the facts. They always come back and say Fauci was responsible for closing schools. I had nothing to do. Let's get down to the facts. They always.
You did. You wrote it literally in your journal that you were on the phone with these people closing the schools down, then walks out in public and lies about it to everybody's face on multiple meetings, on multiple shows, because he's a sick person.
I wonder if you would recommend.
And he doesn't want to admit the truth. Now, what we're seeing here is that even Tom Cotton, a senator, he said, Fauci's diary confirms what we have long known. Tony Fauci is a lying fraud who covered up for China and really for himself, because Fauci was at the NIAID and the National Institutes of Health, who was literally signing off on the funding that was going to EcoHealth Alliance, and then they would travel over to Wuhan and they would conduct their gain of function research that he also lied about in Congress soon thereafter to Rand Paul, which I'm sure is going to come back up again. And what's interesting is that when the investigation needed to get underway to go figure out what actually happened here, we put, according to Fauci's people, the murderers in charge of the murder investigation. EcoHealth Alliance is Peter Daszak and others were over there as part of the WHO team. We've just learned this recently, who were doing the actual inquiry. And then when EcoHealth Alliance's Peter Daszak came back across the border and the Border Patrol wanted to talk to him to see if he was bringing back samples from Dr. She-Bat Lady's lab, that the FBI stepped in and said, stand down, don't look at anything, let him come just waddling on through. And of course he did. So more on this comes from Hans Monkey, who is also been a big purveyor of the truth on this matter for years now. He said about another one of the entries that this entry for May 21, 2020 is one of the most grotesque documents that you will ever read. Okay, May 21, 2020, rewinding the clock, the national lockdown or national emergency order came back around in March 2020. This is like at the apex of COVID. It opens with the mounting COVID death toll and people dying across the country. Then Fauci abruptly pivots into an extended exercise in self-congratulation about his newfound fame. How was someone so profoundly narcissistic ever allowed to accumulate so much power and rise so high? This whole thing is unreal. And a lot of, I think, the accolades for Fauci were probably political, because if you recall back during COVID, we saw the death counter every single day on the mainstream media. We had repeatedly the number going up, like in this red death count. Plus 1,000, plus 1,000. We just crossed 100,000. We just crossed 115,000. And they were just salivating, lapping it up, because there are many of them in a death cult that are happy with these things. And then once Trump lost the election, what happened? We got the numbers flipped. Then the media got rid of the red death counter and they created the vaccines administered counter. And then that was, of course, in a green font, by and large. And those numbers would go up. 100,000 people vaccinated, 200,000 people vaccinated. And even Kamala and Biden were poo-pooing Trump's Operation Warp Speed. They were saying, we're not going to take the Trump shot. We don't know what's in there. We don't know what's going on. Then as soon as the election went their way, after we had months and months of an full-blown political attack on the president for mismanaging COVID, for not trusting the science. And Fauci was like the opposite anchor of that, right? So Trump comes out, he wants to do these things. They turn Fauci into like this saint, this steward of the science and the truth. And so they were just really propping him up, knowing that it was harming their political opponents, in this case, Trump. Then, of course, December comes around, Biden's got shots in his arm. Floop, floop, floop. Kamala takes the shot because they're going to go in and then they start mandating it across the government. You have to take this or we're going to throw you out of the military and we're going to strip away your funding. And then that trickled down to all of the other agencies, firefighters, nurses, police officers, people in the military, all thrown out if they didn't do this thing. And of course, all brought to you by Pfizer every single day on Jake Tapper's show. So here's Fauci's entry. And here was the death counter scoreboard. May 21, 2020, global deaths, 234,000, new 24,000, deaths 9,800, Italy 3,400 deaths, now passing China. Then we come to the USA, 19,300 deaths, new 5,300, or cases, this is probably, then deaths 272, 73 new. And so this was just like the opening salvo. Numbers got much worse, allegedly. Then at a task force meeting, this is what Fauci says. I stress the problem about the PPEs being diverted to testing as opposed to HCWs. I also emphasized this strongly at the subsequent press conference. Again, we met with POTUS, Trump, after the TF meeting and in preparation for the presser. Very good press conference. And then transitions. Okay. And Fauci also, remember when he said, don't put your mask on, it's not going to do anything. Then afterwards, put your mask on or you're going to kill everybody. We're sitting here going, what are you talking about? He said, oh, cloth masks aren't going to do anything. Stop raiding the shelves for these masks. You don't need hand sanitizer rubbed all over every orifice of your body. You know, it's going to be fine. Just stay home, whatever. And then turns around and says, you have to put your mask on. Then we're going to do this social distancing brainwashing operation. As long as you stand 6 feet apart from each other, you're not going to die, whatever. Then he transitions. Big front page article about me appeared in the Washington Post. Okay. Very flattering. The situation with my national and international fame is explosive, he writes, and really unimaginable. It is not hyperbole to say that today I am the most famous and talked about person in the country and one of the most recognizable person in the world. Countless profiles on me in multiple media. I cannot even read all the things that are written about me since I am so busy. ... Seriously. POTUS seemed to be enamored of me. Even though I am taking the spotlight away from him, we are developing a very unique and interesting relationship. The entire Secret Service Corps is coming over to me and chatting. They let me into the first gate without even checking ID. Everyone is worried about my health and welfare, probably because it is all over the place and that I am almost 80 years old. Wow. What a hero. Everyone's honoring him. Everybody wants to talk to him. And he's just loving it up, lapping it up. And of course, why was he on the media so much? It's because this is what the press was doing. This is a great clip that is assembled by, once again, Tom S. Elliott on X over from Grabian. And it's the supercut. This is what we had to live through for multiple years.
The single most respected voice in the pandemic. It's Dr. Anthony Fauci.
The man who's become known as America's doctor.
The nation's top infectious disease expert, Anthony Fauci.
You are seen to many as a superhero.
Dr. Anthony Fauci, American hero and New York Yankee fan.
You've done so much for this country in terms of this crisis, so I really appreciate your insight.
Who better to give us answers that we can trust than Dr. Anthony Fauci?
The perfect person to answer our questions today. Joining us now, Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Dr. Anthony Fauci, appreciate you.
And as you're watching this, just notice all of the people who are elevating him, who are making sure that everyone knows what an honorable person he is and what a great purveyor of health he is. All of these people are anti-Trump lunatics. Every single one of them. Joe Mika Scarborough, the other lady, that dude. And it's just friends, right? They're justifying Fauci because Fauci will be beneficial for their political party.
Appreciate your candor.
Dr. Fauci, appreciate the candor.
We appreciate your service to this country.
Mika.
We appreciate your service.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service.
Greatly appreciate your service to America.
Thank you for your 37 years of service, I believe, to 7 presidents, and thank you for your work over the past year.
The great news is you're sticking around in the Biden administration.
Okay, there's the death counter scoreboard right there, right there. Deaths, 1.7 million. Constantly just going up and up and up. And every time they could talk about it, they would just frame this as though it was bad for the president. Trump is mismanaging this. Look at how many Americans the president is killing. And we have a lot of questions about those numbers and comorbidities and whether hospitals were incentivized to actually classify and chronicle COVID deaths as COVID deaths rather than some other type of death in order to get the federal funding back to reimburse them for a COVID death and more. But you get the point. And then, as we mentioned, soon as it's over, as soon as Trump loses, it then becomes the vaccine counter. And then Biden and Kamala take credit for that. And then that number goes up and up and up. And suddenly the frame for the American public and the world is that they're saving people. Trump was killing people.
We are so grateful to you, Dr. Fauci, for everything you do.
Thank you so much for everything you do.
Thank you very much for everything that you do.
Thanks so much for the work that you do.
Thank you very much for the reassurance and, as always, for all of your public service. Thank you, Dr. Fauci.
Thank you for all your guidance this past year, and it's greatly appreciated.
Dr. Fauci, on behalf of all of our viewers here in the U.S. and around the world, thanks very much for
doing what you're doing. Thanks very much for joining us. Please thank your entire team as well. We are all grateful.
Get your rest because we need you.
You are one of the busiest scientists in the country right now. It is an honor to have some of your time to help us understand what is going on. I know a lot of people have a lot of questions, so we appreciate your time, sir.
We need people to continue to have faith in science. So thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you for being straight with us. Thank you for being able to come on.
Yeah, faith in science. It's the same thing. It's like faith in democracy, okay? We just have faith in democracy. These platitudes that they throw around when they're trying to silence debate on any of these things. Science has an opening for debate. You come up with a hypothesis, you test the hypothesis, you weigh different evidence. If there's evidence that challenges the hypothesis, then you have to try it, see if it validates or not, reach a conclusion. If it doesn't, you got to come up with a new hypothesis. So debate is allowed, but they didn't want that. All of these, of course, mainstream media companies, every single one of these was, brought to you by Pfizer, brought to you by Moderna, and all of the others. And again, there's Maddow, and all of them were anti-Trump. All right, just very simple. There's nobody on there who was extremely pro-Trump, who was lapping this guy up, even though, of course, there were those as well. So we're seeing exactly what the frame was. And once again, from Tom S. Elliott, the mainstream media now is not really that interested in covering Fauci. How come? Well, we know why. But historically, they did. They had him on all the time. The science, the hero, the saint of America. And now they're not talking about the diaries. And so Grabien is a website that assembles a bunch of clips from the mainstream sources so that you can go clip them and share them on your shows, or you just rip off Tom Elliott like we do. But you can go over there, and he did a little bit of a roundup to see how much time has been spent on these diaries since the news dropped just a couple days ago over the weekend, and almost none, as you can see. On 724, zeros across the board, maybe 30 seconds from Newsmax. 725, 0 total minutes. 726, 6 minutes, with 11 of those minutes, total time, whatever that is, or 11, maybe 30-second slots or something, coming over from Fox News. And then on 727, once again, total time, 0 minutes in terms of total hits. So now they don't want to talk about Fauci. They don't want to get into the science all of a sudden, because Fauci's a liar, and they all were involved in the cover-up and the perpetuation of the lies. But once the truth comes out, all of a sudden they're mum, and maybe the Pfizer cash has started to dry up as well. But Rand Paul, now a lot of that was, of course, kind of topical details. He says, I didn't close the schools down. He did. And now we're learning that the root cause of this may have been closer and more near to Fauci than has ever been let on. And so Rand Paul dropped this in a 9-point thread on X. He says, my investigation, this is where this all came from, and we're grateful for Rand Paul. Everyone else has largely moved on, except Rand and Ron Johnson and a couple of others. But he says Fauci kept a diary. What he wrote privately and what he told the country were two different stories. So today I'm releasing some entries, and we'll take a look at these from 2019 to 2022. And I got to hand it to his graphics person, because they wrote Tony's diary in a pink font in the style of like a teenage girl, which is kind of how Fauci is, really. Here's the background on this. Do not open, like with a lock on it or something. During his time as the NIAID director, and particularly during COVID, Fauci took meticulous notes about his work and kept it in a diary. He made notes on his conversations, his decisions, his thoughts about actions taken by politicians, and more. This is his own historical record containing almost daily entries. Later in the pandemic, he glorified all of the positive attention that he was receiving. Legacy media was elevating him. He demonized those who questioned him, like Rand. And many entries are entries that completely undermine the official narrative. And let's take a look at the threads. He said on January 26, 2020, okay, this is right at the beginning of the pandemic. It's all freaking everybody out. We all remember it. Trump came out later in March and said, okay, it's national emergency time, largely at the behest of Fauci and the rest of the people in this game. But here's one of the messages. January 2020. And he, at the very beginning, is already saying it did not come from a wet market. Okay, then for the remaining years, that's all they said. And if you even suggested that it came from a lab because Fauci and the Chinese were working together and conducting gain-of-function experiments to create weird freak furin cleavage site viruses, you were castigated as a conspiracy theorist. He says, all right, look, January 26th. Game on! 3 exclamation points. Almost like he's excited about this thing kicking off. Things are rapidly changing. Dr. Ma Xiaowei, the Chinese Minister of Health, gave a press statement saying that the incubation period of COVID is 1 to 14 days and the virus is being transmitted when people are asymptomatic. This has enormous implications for how we handle people from Wuhan, like our diplomats who are now on the way back from Wuhan, having been ordered to evacuate. Should we quarantine them? I'm very skeptical about the Chinese interpretation of their data. I spoke with Mike Ryan from WHO from Geneva, and he and Tedros are going to Wuhan soon. Mike is very skeptical that asymptomatic spread is present, or at worst is a major driver. Mike, another guy, also feels this way. I spoke with Nancy and Bob about this to coordinate our responses, and we felt that we should send our epidemiologist to China to work with them to see the data firsthand, since it's important. It would require quarantining for a period of time, even asymptomatic people who arrive from Wuhan. Now, it appears using EPI data and genomic data that the first infection was in early December and was not connected to the market. Not connected to the market, which they said it was for the years that followed repeatedly, and they censored you if you challenged it and said otherwise. The infection spread among people weeks before the Chinese reported that they were dealing with a new infection, and that gave the virus time to establish itself in multi-generational sustained spread. Remember, he says, Fauci writing, early on, the Chinese were saying that there is no human-to-human transmission, and all of the original 27 cases were from the market. Now we know the market was not the source. It was the amplifier. Somebody got sick, went to the market, and then spread it there. Now, having said that, somewhere the virus jumped from animals to humans. And we know that they were testing these viruses, these COVID viruses, on other animals. And then they would pull them from the animals and then Frankenstein them, lop them together, and insert the spike protein. So at some point, that could have been the lab, when they took it from an animal source and modified it to be more infectious to humans. Then he says there is complete chaos in China now with President Xi declaring an emergency. Chinese are building within days 1,000 to 1,300 bed hospitals, flying in hundreds of medical personnel from the military. They've shut down travel, schools closed, running out of supplies and more. Then he had a call, and with the deputies and others at the White House are now calling for a close of the borders. We want to stop any traffic that's coming from China, which would seem like a good idea. Okay, Trump comes in, says lock down the border. No one's coming from China. But Fauci's against that, even though he just admitted that there are asymptomatic people who are now transmitting the viruses, many of whom are coming from Wuhan. Anthony said that he heard that I was in favor of that. We'll have an 11 a.m. meeting tomorrow from SCIF with Deputy National Security Advisor Pottinger regarding possibly closing the borders from the China entry. Next message. That was in January. Next one comes in February. This is the call that produced the Proximal origin paper. This was the fake paper that they wrote that we saw in prior disclosures from Rand Paul. Even the people who were the authors of this really started to backtrack and say, actually, we don't think it is as natural as we were arguing in our paper. That paper became the foundation and the pretext for everybody in the media to say it's natural. Now, we all could sense, we're not scientists or epidemiologists or geneticists, but we could just tell from the posture of our own government how serious this was and how different it was from every other type of pandemic that we've seen in our lives. And we've seen many of them: bird flu, swine flu, H1N1, whatever. All of them come out, and it's always, Ebola is going on right now. And it's always a response, no question. People get nervous, we go deal with it. But this was different. This was seemingly something way more serious. The whole of government responded. Some of that might have just been because it was an election year. But I think it was much broader than that. And they realized this thing may actually be a bioweapon. And so that justified the response that we all had to live through. So 12 scientists now come through. Only 2 at this original meeting in February 2020, 2 out of the 12 concluded that it was natural. Other 10 of them said not. Per Fauci's own notes, the rest felt that a deliberate insertion of the protein, the spike protein at the furin cleavage site was possible. This was never a 50-50 room. There was never any doubt or debate about it, but they lied. So here Fauci wrote this in his own notes. February 1, 2020, conference call with Jeremy Francis and several other scientists gathered by Jeremy. Here's what the call included. Francis Collins, director of US NIH. Fauci's on there. Jeremy Farrer. We got Patrick Christian Anderson, one of the main authors of the paper, and a bunch of other people from everywhere. Professor of virology, professor of life sciences, molecular evolution, bunch of people who are apparently smarter than they let on. There was not total agreement about the likelihood of deliberate insertion, says Fauci. And let's not forget, okay, Fauci knew all of this. He knew what was going on. He's just playing dumb right here. Just saying, well, we're trying to investigate how all this happened. He knew about the contract with EcoHealth Alliance. He knew what Peter Daszak was doing over there at the Wuhan Institute and is just kind of now going through the motions. And then as he's writing these notes, he's kind of, trying to engineer the outcome that he wants so that he immunizes himself from any liability. Ron said that he was sure this could occur naturally, and we should not waste our time and divert effort to pursue this. This is expected of him since he was the original gain-of-function person with Yoshi Kawoka. Also, Christian Drosten was with Ron, and the rest, so that's 2. The rest felt, all of the other 10, felt that deliberate insertion was possible, and given the fact that Dr. Zhengli Shi Bat Lady at Wuhan has been working for years in gain of function on coronaviruses to allow literally the adaptation of the spike protein to bind to humans, we could not let this go. So we decided to have Jeremy with Francis to contact Tedros. With Stuart Simonson's help, I arranged this to see if Tedros would convene the experts. So 10 out of the 12 say, yeah, it's very weird that we have a Wuhan Institute of Virology over there, and the internet figured this out pretty quickly as well. Like, oh, that's weird. It comes from Wuhan. What's over there? Oh, here's a lab right there. And we're able to piece the puzzle pieces together, but Fauci and the rest of them like, oh no, it has to be natural. Why? Because they did it. So then on February 3rd, Fauci calls George Gao, the head of China's CDC. Gao confirms asymptomatic people do transmit. Fauci also then writes that Wuhan health officials, quote, did not tell him this, and he thus gave out false information, a lapse that, quote, likely allowed the outbreak to take hold. So rather than doing what Trump wanted to do and locking everything down, Fauci's advising him not to do that. Then we fast forward a little bit. February 12, 2020, Fauci briefs 4 congressional delegations in one day. Then he runs into Larry Kudlow, who asks when COVID crashes the economy. Fauci says, I told him that we're okay for now. That was 9 days after the Chinese told him that there is asymptomatic spread. So people are walking around, they don't even know that they're infected, and they're spreading the virus around, your little bioweapon. On February 12th, Fauci writes, quote, individual reports are coming out about various clinical characteristics. Unreviewed report now of virus in saliva of infected people. Let us see what kind of response that gets. Very busy day with 4 congressional briefings, exclamation. Also complicated by wake of Eric Scorsese today and funeral tomorrow. Much stress. First, we briefed House members at Rayburn, led by Rosa DeLauro, the blue-haired freak show, Nita Lowey, and Tom Cole. Then we went to the Senate Dirksen to brief senators led by Lamar Alexander. Then to the Capitol Visitor Center to brief House members led by Elliot Engel. Then to Majority to Steny Hoyer's office. Steny was profuse in his praise for me, which was a little embarrassing. Yeah, for Steny and for Fauci and for America. profuse in his praise by the guy who was behind it. On my way out of the White House from 4 to 5 p.m. task force meeting, ran into Larry Kudlow, who's become my new best friend. He joked about how many years I've been doing this, and he has been following my career. And Fauci, was a big problem during the AIDS epidemic and more. His main question was, when is this COVID-19 going to crash the economy? When do we need to start worrying about it so we can start shorting some stocks? It told him that we are okay for now, but this could change rapidly if we start seeing sustained person-to-person transmission. He asked me to keep him informed when, in my opinion, things are starting to go bad. Then we advance. May 23rd, 2021. Fauci calls the leader and the author of the main paper, the Proximal Origin paper that we've covered here at length. The paper that he'd been citing publicly as independent science, right? They said, no, we didn't. This is not our conclusion. These are real scientists who made this determination. Of course, Fauci was guiding the outcome on that from the very beginning. For reassurance about his own NIH grant. His diary says, I feel much better now that he is in total support of what I have been saying. So he writes, at the appropriations hearing coming up next week, interesting to see if they fixate on the lab. Interesting to see if they fixate on the escape theory, which we believe is true. I had a very interesting and helpful conversation today with Christian Anderson, the guy who is like the lead author of the Natural Origin paper. He was very emphatic that the work that was done at the Wuhan Institute in association with our grant. So Fauci pays for work at Wuhan, and then Christian comes back and says, very emphatically, that was not gain of function, even though it was. In addition, he confirmed that if you match the chimeric viruses that were made in the context of the NIH grant in Wuhan, they're not even in close in sequence-wise to COVID. Christian will be writing a letter together with some data on this topic. However, I feel much better now that he is in total support of what I've been saying. Okay, so money goes out, and then suddenly people align with Fauci, who is now like this hero who's being paraded about as the science, and you don't want to cross Fauci now. Then we get to July 21. There's a National Security Council briefing. Fauci writes, quote, the FBI has no idea what they're talking about for saying it's a lab leak. Yeah, they did. While NSA's natural origin view was reasonable. And we had like a split, even amongst our intelligence agencies, because they're not that intelligent. Some of them saying it was from a lab, others saying we can't come to a determination. I think the CIA said that. And then others still, of course, saying it was a natural origin. Here we see from Fauci, I had a very important meeting today with the NSC led by Beth and Mar, who is the senior director for the intelligence programs there. We met in a skiff and discussed a briefing document that had been presented to the president a week or so ago. And this is 2021, so now this is Biden. Beth wanted me to have an official briefing because of the catastrophic briefing that the amateurs from the CIA gave me several weeks ago. There were no new surprises for me in the briefing, except it became clear that the FBI has no idea what they're talking about, since they are convinced that the origin of COVID is from a lab leak. The reasons that they give do not make any sense. Then in contrast, the NSA gave some reasonable hypotheses leaning heavily toward a natural jump of species in the environment. I spent some time explaining to Mar and Beth my own theories that the Chinese act like they're covering up something, even when they have nothing to cover up. So then why are they acting that way? They manifested this in their response to the original COVID when they insisted this was just an atypical influenza, when in fact it was the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. In addition, they likely shot themselves in the foot when they denied the presence of wild animals in the market. Maybe they were being truthful. There's no animals over there. What are you talking about? Well, you should have admitted it. And we know now they were present, and the Chinese cleaned out the market before adequate testing of animals could occur. So in essence, they clouded the possibility of proving natural emergence. Maybe because they know it wasn't a natural emergence. They purged the wet market to stop the spread. They knew that somebody went over there, that was an incubator for the entire transmission that came in the aftermath. And so they just wiped it clean. So I urge the folks to work closely with qualified card-carrying evolutionary virologists like Christian Anderson and others. I also explained to them the multiple reasons epidemiologically and molecularly why it is almost certain that the virus evolved naturally from a species jump, we don't know where, even though, and the Chinese destroyed everything, so we can't really disprove my theory because the evidence is gone. So I'm just going to explain it according to the science. And even though I emphasize that I keep an open mind about the possibility of a lab leak, which is implying that he doesn't at all. However, in this regard, I emphasize that just because two alternatives are possible, that does not mean they are equally probable. Which one just makes more sense? They're doing funky gain-of-function research in a literal lab where the virus started in Wuhan, or they've got some inexplicable transmission and jump from a species to another species, and then any evidence of that species and that jump are all gone. I emphasize that, and I believe that they understood where I was coming from, and it turned out to be a very good meeting. So the cover-up continues. Rand continues, he says, on July 7th then, Fauci tells the National Security Council to go work with Anderson, the same guys who wrote the original paper. They then post a paper arguing about the natural origin. Boom, paper goes live. It's not a lab leak. Fauci didn't do it. Next morning, it's in his diary along with the CNN write-up. He says on July 8th, 21, Christian Anderson, Bob Gary, and many others came out yesterday with a preprint server paper strongly arguing with good evidence for a natural emergence rather than a lab leak. CNN then took the headline. Says coronavirus almost certainly came from an animal, not a lab leak. Top scientists argue. I had a very useful and enjoyable conversation, writes Fauci, with the president of Chile, Panera. He was very gracious and wanted advice from me on how to handle the outbreak in Chile looking forward. He was very complimentary to me in many ways and asked a number of very intelligent and important questions relevant to his country. Why would you even write that down? He was very complimentary to me. Okay, it's just like he's just lavishing in this. He seems like an extremely engaging person, and it was an enjoyable half an hour that I spent speaking with him via Zoom. Then shares another NPR article from somebody called May Louise Kelly. Then we go a little bit further to July 12th. Rand Paul shares this one. Fauci complains, quote, about how many hours we are wasting in answering letters he calls fundamentally driven by conspiracy theories. And if the science is legitimate, then you'll just be able to quash those theories outright, just present the evidence. But they never did that. They just censored you and threw you off the internet and called you names. From senators he names, including Rand, asking who funded the research is not a conspiracy theory. It's called oversight, and it's just a fact that can go into the analysis. So Fauci wrote this. It is important to point out how many hours we are all wasting in responding to the multiple letters from senators and congressmen fundamentally driven by conspiracy theories that the NIH has funded work at Wuhan Institute of Virology that led to COVID. And there are the literal contracts, like we've read them here. We've shown you the documents, they exist. There was a grant from NIH to EcoHealth Alliance. EcoHealth Alliance was contracted to go do and paid to go do these things in Wuhan. For example, over the weekend, I was on multiple Zoom calls with my staff, fine-tuning the letters' responses to multiple questions from people like Rand Paul, Marshall, and Burr. I am somewhat surprised that Senator Burr was a part of this, since he's generally a friendly person to me. Then we had a very important meeting today by Zoom with Michael Dolston and others from Pfizer, with members of Homeland Health and Human Services and myself. Rochelle Walensky, remember her from CDC under Biden. Francis Collins and others. The Pfizer people present the data from the Israeli study, which we already knew showed a decrease of efficacy against all infection goes down to 64%. And you remember that jab came out very right at the end of 2020. Operation Warp Speed comes out. Suddenly, it's no longer the Trump shot. And then we got Kamala and Biden jabbing themselves in the necks. And they came out every day. If you take this, you will not get it. If you take it, you won't transmit it. 99% effective, 100% effective everywhere. We remember point blank. And I had friends who then went and got this thing, and then they told me, I got COVID, the next week. I'm like, what are you talking about? I thought you took it. I know, I got it, and my husband got it, our whole family got it. The week after they took it. So then, of course, infection goes down, to 64% effectiveness. In addition, they showed some other follow-up data from their phase 3 trial, which showed a decrease in efficacy down to 83%. Oh, clearly Pfizer is intending to suggest that boosts. So get your booster. Particularly for those who are elderly and with underlying conditions. Now, in Israel, they're already boosting some of the elderly and those with underlying conditions. There was a big debate in our own country and worldwide about giving a third shot to fully jabbed people when most of the world is completely unjabbed. This is a debate that will intensify. I believe we need to go ahead and explore the possibility of needing a booster at the same. And people were getting multiple boosters. Multiple. I remember Joe Biden coming out and saying, if you don't do this, you're going to endure a winter of misery and death. You're going to be killing everybody around you. So, people were just brainwashed in multi-dimensional psychological warfare in order to go do this thing. But then people, even as it kept going and they started to realize, oh, wait, maybe we got lied to, they're still getting boosted up. I remember being at a Walgreens one time and heard some guy walk up. He's like, he's on his 6th booster. I'm looking over here like, what is this dude doing? So he says, let's do it. I believe we need to explore this. I've been emphasizing in my public appearances that the requirement for a boost does not mean that they are not highly effective. A boost relates to the durability of the protection, not to the effectiveness of the protection. This is a concept that is often missed by the public. So in other words, it doesn't work. Yeah, we got it. And remember how there wasn't even a conversation about natural immunity? Like if you had gotten it, you still gotten it naturally and you recovered from COVID, then you still needed to go get a jab or else you're going to be killing everybody around you. And people were browbeaten into compliance. You're going to kill your kid. You're going to kill your grandmother. You're going to kill my neighbor. And the people coming out, well, my kid's autistic and he can't go get the jab. Or my kid has some condition, and so you're going to kill my disabled child. People are like, all right, fine, I'll just go get it. Leave me alone. So the whole report came out, and he gives us some other details in here. Let's see if he's got any other highlights for us. And of course, on January 31st, Jeremy Farrar also patched Fauci into a call with Christian Anderson. They weren't trading internet rumors. Together on January 31st, they were staring at the furin cleavage site where they lopped in the spike protein, discussing deliberate insertion and weighing whether the virus had actually escaped from a lab because it doesn't look natural. It looks like somebody hacked this thing up to bits. Before most Americans knew there was even an origins debate, the government's top officials were already talking about the lab leak. Then after the January 31 warning, Fauci proposed a larger group of experts called HHS officials. They split the work into 2 tracks, a security side review through one group and another group. Fauci was not on the edge of the origins inquiry. He was just helping design it. They had another call in February, and a bunch of people were referencing Wuhan and Shi Zhengli's coronavirus work. His virus described that one, which we read. The government also had a formal review on February 6th. The first review found no clear evidence of malfeasance. But by April 17th, Fauci was telling the country that the virus was, quote, totally consistent with the natural species jump. By May, he was brushing aside a lab leak accident as a circular argument, saying that this was not even worth entertaining. Now, if you actually follow the scientific method, until you can validate it and rule it out, it is worth considering. Otherwise, you're just a bad scientist. So then in May 21, Fauci said, and he wrote that public affairs officials resisted an NIH statement, proactive talking points and direct responses. He warned, and his warning was blunt. If the government stayed quiet, it would look like, quote, we're covering things up. This is exactly how deep the credibility problem had become. The fight was no longer confined to the science. It was now about what the NIH would say and what types of answers Congress would be given. On July 7th, 21, Fauci met with others and again criticized the government and anybody asking questions, including the entire FBI, for saying, yeah, it came from a lab. Then he had another conversation with Anderson, and he felt much better knowing that people were lining up behind his fake explanation. He wrote, privately, The scientists were staring at the furin cleavage site and talking about a deliberate insertion, then goes publicly and lies and said the virus was totally consistent with the natural evolution and it doesn't look like Frankenstein's monster where you're adding someone else's head to another body. And you see that connection point, you go, oh, what is that? They looked at it, oh, that's the spike protein, somebody shoved it in there. So all of this was released once again by Rand Paul. The guy's been just releasing docs after docs, and they have been amazing to see. And I would presume he's got a lot more that he has not released yet publicly. And the goal would be to pin down Fauci and to make him answer questions about this. And if the documents show that he's a liar, then that will be well worth the efforts. And there was just a new 465-page document that just dropped the prequel, which are all now out now. And here's the highlights of this one that Rand just dropped, presumably moments ago. He said here in this one, before COVID made him a household name, Fauci was already writing it all down. He even was talking about this stuff from 2001 to 2015 and has been a liar from the very beginning. During the 2001 anthrax attack, a scientist at Army's lab told Fauci that the anthrax sent to Senator Daschle was weaponized. Better, he said, that better than any bioweapon of anthrax that the U.S. has ever made. Days later, the head of the Office of Homeland Security went on TV and said he'd been told it was just garden variety. Okay, so Fauci says bioweapon of anthrax. Then somebody else goes on TV and says garden variety. So he mentioned it. He also was asking Dick Cheney about this. He was not impressed by the CIA back in 2008. And the guy's been lying for decades now. So 465 additional pages on Fauci's internal messages to himself, all in the hands of Rand Paul. And so we're looking forward to this congressional inquiry, which will be coming up this week. And we'll be covering it live on Wednesday when it drops. So Rand also shared this. He said, words don't lie. Anthony Fauci's own diary proves that he always knew one thing in private and said the exact opposite in public. Here's a little bit of this testimony and some of what we can expect coming up this week.
But she's had the flu for 14 days. Should she get a flu shot?
Well, no. If she got the flu for 14 days, she's as protected as anybody can be. Because the best vaccination is to get infected yourself.
And
so
she should not get it?
If she really has the flu, she definitely doesn't need a flu vaccine. If she really has the flu,
she should not get it again.
No, she doesn't need it because it's the most potent vaccination is getting infected yourself.
Oh. Yeah.
This is an ongoing question, and we've had ever-evolving opinions from you, Dr. Fauci. Currently, antibody surveys show that 80% of children, approximately 80% of children, have had COVID, and yet there are no guidelines coming from you or anybody in the government to take into account their naturally acquired immunity. You seemed quite certain of yourself in 2004, but in 2022, there's a lot less certainty. One of the things that we also know after looking at this for 2 to 3 years is that the mortality from COVID is very similar, if not less, than influenza. So when we look at this, we wonder, why you seem to really embrace basic immunology back in 2004 and why you seem to reject it now.
Well, I don't reject basic immunology, Senator. And I have never denied that there is importance of the protection following infection. However, as we have said many times, and as has been validated by the authorization by the FDA through their committee and the recommendation by the CDC through their committee, that a vaccination following infection gives an added extra boost. And that film that you showed is really taken out of context. I believe that was when someone called in who had a reaction to a vaccine and asked me through a telephone in the interview if they should get vaccinated again. So it was in the context of someone who had a reaction. And as a matter of fact, Reuters fact check looked at that and said, Fauci's 2004 comments do not contradict his pandemic stance.
Actually, words don't lie. If you look at the words behind me, we can go over them a little bit at a time. She doesn't need it because the most potent vaccination is getting infected yourself.
It is true. It is true, Senator. It is a very potent way to protect.
So when you're trying to tell us that kids need a third or a fourth vaccine, are you including the variability or the variable of previous infection in the studies? No, you're not. Because when you have approved vaccines in recent times, and the committees that have approved it for children don't report anything on hospitalization or death or transmission. They only report that if you give them the jab, they'll make antibodies. And you can give kids hundreds of jabs and they'll make antibodies every time, but that does not prove efficacy. So what you're doing is denying the very fundamental premise of immunology that previous infection does provide some sort of immunity. It's not in any of your studies. Almost none of your studies from the CDC or from the government have the variable of whether or not you've been previously infected. So let's look at adults. I've had 3 infections. Should I get a 4th one? If you're going to measure whether I get a 4th one, you need a category that has a 4th one in it, and you need one that has nothing in it, no vaccine or the 4th vaccine. But you also need to know whether they've been infected. If you ignore whether they've been infected, you're ignoring a vaccine, basically, so you're ignoring a variable. So what you're giving us is this, you decry, and people decry vaccine hesitancy. It's coming from the gobbledygook that you give us. You're not paying attention to the science. The very basic science is that previous infection provides a level of immunity. If you ignore that in your studies, if you don't present that in your committees, you're not being truthful or honest with us.
True. And the problem for them is that if you have natural immunity included in the analysis, then they may not be able to sell you a new jab. And they really wanted those things to be flying off the shelves. And they were. We looked back during the pandemic at the stock numbers of Moderna and Pfizer, all the way up and to the right. These small companies turned into multi-billion-dollar companies because they had a product that was being mandated and essentially ordered by the federal government. And the people who caused the pandemic were the ones who were facilitating the delivery of the solution, and they got fat and rich off of it. So we're excited for round 5 or whatever number is coming up when Rand Paul and Anthony Fauci sit back down. It feels like a heavyweight fight coming soon. But now Rand has a lot more ammunition that he'll be using in this inquiry, including Fauci's own internal diary. And inside, we have lies that abound. Now, of course, Fauci's pardoned by Joe Biden's auto pen, which is illegitimate, and he should be prosecuted, and he can go challenge the prosecution by invoking the defense of immunity or a pardon power, essentially to preempt the prosecution. He can make that claim in court once he's prosecuted, which I think should be the approach. But new lies that he makes. Okay, so when Rand comes out and asks him about something, and if Fauci lies about that new question, that is a new lie to Congress that is not covered by the pardon. Rand saying, if he lies like he did before, his preemptive pardon will not cover him. And so that's why I think a lot of people are going to be paying attention to this. Biden's pardon only goes out through the end of his term, all the way back to 2014. But new lies will not be covered. And so we'll see what Fauci does, whether he invokes the 5th and then potentially faces an obstruction charge for not answering questions about the content of the pardoned material, or if he suddenly is, I can't recall, it's 2026, this happened a long time ago, or what. We'll be here to see. We hope Fauci's ego and his sociopathy continues to emerge, and that he does the Fauci thing that he's always done and lies, and Rand Paul catches him in one, which is why we're going to be here to cover it. So thanks for joining as we do. Thanks for subscribing. We'll come back. We'll kick it off. We'll go through the whole hearing. Should be Wednesday, 8:30 Eastern time for another round of this battle. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you back on Wednesday. Now, we're not done yet. We got a couple of other updates here today. And Now we're talking about the Haitians who are about to get sent back home to the great Haiti, hopefully very soon. So here's what we've got on this story from the Trump administration. Trump's Homeland Security now preparing to deport the Haitians. We know the Supreme Court said Homeland Security and the executive branch have the ultimate final say on temporary protected status. Once the decision has been made to end the prolongation of that status, you have to go home. That's the whole purpose of the program. And judges can't insert themselves to prevent that from happening. And so now the time is up. The Haitian TPS is canceled, and immigration is attempting now to effectuate the removal. And CBS News got their hands on some of the documents saying that ICE and Customs is now planning to ramp up operations to arrest and deport the Haitian migrants. Hundreds of thousands of Haitians who've been here since essentially 1990 are now bracing for impact and the termination of their status. They've got federal documents, they have agency sources, and here is this report before we zoom in on the details, courtesy of CBS.
Immigrants from Haiti are the next targets of President Trump's mass deportation campaign. ICE is planning to ramp up operations across the country to identify, arrest, and deport Haitian immigrants who are suspected of being in the country illegally as early as this week. That is according to sources at ICE, but also internal documents that we obtained. And this comes as more than 300,000 Haitian immigrants are bracing and preparing to lose their legal protections under the TPS or Temporary Protective Status policy. The Supreme Court ruling paving the way for that TPS policy to be terminated takes effect tomorrow. And the documents we obtained indicate that Ohio is one of the states that ICE is potentially planning to target as part of this operation. That state is, of course, home to large communities of Haitian immigrants, including in the city of Springfield, where Haitian immigrants were falsely accused, including by President Trump, of eating cats and dogs.
Yeah, I don't know how false that was. I think there was some evidence for that. So, of course, they have to reframe everything as Trump's a racist bigot, something like that. But if Haiti is so great as they say it is, then they can go home. They were here temporarily. There was an earthquake a long time ago. Every time it's been extended, it's some other justification for it. Political turmoil, poverty, economics, whatever. We've got a lot of those problems in America. And so they can go back home and deal with it down there. A little bit more news on this from CBS saying there are now plans to conduct operations to arrest and deport hundreds of thousands. That's a lot. So they're going to Ohio, places like Springfield, and sending them on back. The internal plans are around a deportation blitz as status comes to a close today on Monday. Since the Supreme Court came down, we know that there's really no other avenue for them to challenge this. And the ICE sources who are describing the preparations are requesting anonymity to describe internal plans that have not been publicly disclosed. Now, any uptick in deportations would almost certainly raise political and humanitarian challenges. We know it's so problematic down there, but if you say it's problematic, and if you say that there's a problem with a bunch of foreigners in our country from a problematic country, then they say you're a racist, Haiti's great, don't condescend to them, which of course begs the question why they don't go back to their great country. In a statement by Homeland, they said, we don't discuss this, okay? And by the way, they wrote, TPS has already been used as a de facto amnesty program, and if they don't want to get deported and arrested, they should self-deport. What we would say now is, quote, it's closing time, which means you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. The good news, not too late, we'll give you a $2,600 check and a free flight. Now, these other groups like the Haitian Bridge Alliance, which may have been inspired by the Haitians who invaded under the bridge in Texas, is saying we are in a state of trauma, fear, and terror. And now people don't know what to do. But you've had plenty of time to figure it out. Congress created this in 1990, TPS, and it's been going on for decades. A version of Haiti TPS has been around since 2010. There was an earthquake in 2010. And then it got extended and extended and extended again. So we had activist judges like Anna C. Reyes, the lesbian judge, first ever in her district. She said this is racism. Supreme Court said, we don't care. It is the decision. Congress wrote the law. Law says the decision goes to the executive branch. And so now plans are unfolding and the operation is hopefully underway. And here's what Stephen Miller had to say about all of this. If you don't have status, then you gotta go. Pretty simple.
Do you expect the administration to deport anyone who loses TPS status as a result of this ruling?
Well, of course, if you no longer have status in this country, then you're supposed to be deported. And in particular, in the case of the Haitians, the Biden administration flew over vast numbers. It's hard to know the exact number, but probably more than 1 million illegal immigrants from Haiti. And that's not counting the border crossings into the United States. So these are people who've only been here for a few months, who are receiving welfare, whose all their ties, all their social connections, all their family is back in their home country of Haiti. And of course, that's where they should go.
Do you expect the administration to...
It's their home country. They were here as guests temporarily. You don't invite somebody to come stay over in your home forever. They're here until they get back on their feet and then they can go home. And so this has already been contemplated forever. Trump said back during the campaign, we were going to start to fix the integrity of our demographics and our nation, and we're not going to allow a bunch of foreigners to continue to be here, so it's time to go home. They were on notice. By the way, they were on notice when he ended it. Long time ago. It was canceled. They've had months and months to litigate this. They've already been stopped from being deported by Anna C. Reyes. It had to work its way up to the Supreme Court. And so this is not a new sudden surprise where you get perpetual amnesty and residency in the United States. And plus now we know every single non-citizen who drops a baby off here automatically gets a citizen child. That citizen child can then vote in our elections and can request, once they hit the age of 18, chain migration to bring their parents in as naturalized citizens. So the problem needs to be addressed. It would have been nice if we could have had a reasonable debate about immigration policy, but unfortunately, the Biden administration invaded the nation with estimates as much as 25 million people, according to President Trump, who came in. And there's no more time for talking. So it's coming to a close. And there was a great post by this guy, Aaron McIntyre. He's over at The Blaze. And a lot of people will say all the time, like, our founders never envisioned us deporting people, or the United States is a melting pot, which is a made up term that was created back in the 1920s by a socialist. And we should have, a diverse population, like diversity is our strength or whatever. In fact, that's not true. George Washington, according to Aaron, sent a letter where he explained this, a couple of them, saying that laws may be necessary to protect America against foreigners who come in and who seek to sow dissension among native-born Americans. Here's a letter that Washington sent November 22nd, 1789 to this guy called Alexander Spotswood, writing this from Pennsylvania. He said, "But I will take the liberty of advising such as are not thoroughly convinced and whose minds are yet open to conviction to read the pieces and hear the arguments, which have been adduced in favor of, as well as those against, the constitutionality and expediency of those laws, before they decide and consider to what lengths a certain description of men in our country already driven and seem resolved further to drive matters, and then ask themselves if it is not time and expedient to resort to protecting laws against aliens. For citizens you certainly know are not affected by that law, who acknowledge no allegiance to this country, and in many instances are sent among us, as there is the best circumstantial evidence to prove, for the express purpose of poisoning the minds of our people, and to sow dissensions among them in order to alienate their affections from the government of their choice, thereby endeavoring to dissolve the union, and of course the fair and happy prospects which were unfolding to our view from the revolution." Okay? So back in 1789, the country was brand spanking new, still sparkling. They're saying they're sending foreigners over here to wreck the country. Washington said that, and he said it again. Here's another one, November 15th, 1794, explaining in a letter to John Adams, written Saturday the 15th, 1794, he said, "My opinion with respect to immigration is that except of useful mechanics and some particular descriptions of men or professions, there is no need of encouragement, while the policy or advantage of its taking place in a body, I mean the settling of them in a body, may be much questioned. For by doing so, they retain the language, the habits, and the principles, whether they are good or bad, which they may bring with them." So when you bring in foreigners, they don't have an allegiance to America. Washington understood that in 1794. Language, habits, and principles, some good, some bad, are brought in. And in his letters, he says, we should reject foreign influence. Writing this one, 1796, "Against the insidious wiles of foreign influence, I conjure you to believe me, fellow citizens. The jealousy of a free people ought to be constantly awake, since history and experience prove that foreign influence is one of the most baneful foes of Republican government." You need a nation that is actually not diverse in terms of its values, in terms of its principles, in terms of its beliefs. What does it stand for? The more diversified it gets, and when people come in and they're not actually Republican in terms of governance, they're not really interested in democracy, they're not interested in free speech, they don't really cherish things like the Second Amendment, the things that we hold sacred, concepts of liberty, when they want to be more in alignment with the herd and have a different philosophy of governance, and don't even speak the language, don't honor the flag, don't care about the traditions, don't honor the history of the nation, argue that they're on stolen land and the people who built the country are actually bad for some reason, then that creates more problems than benefits it brings. And so Washington was ahead of the curve. We knew this hundreds of years ago, that we don't need to have a bunch of foreigners in order to make America what it is. And we're pretty tired of hearing that. So here's more on what the administration is doing. Now, they're changing some immigration rules. This was a new update that dropped today, saying the U.S. Department of Homeland Security is going to be facilitating some changes that will enhance the processing and reduce the backlog of all the people who come here and claim asylum, right? I'm under attack in my home nation. I'm Kilmar wife beater Abrego Garcia, and a barrio gang is attacking my mama's pupusa business. So I need to come to America, and you have to accept me. You can't kick me out because I'm an asylum seeker. Now, currently, both USCIS and the DOJ immigration judges, they adjudicate these applications for asylum. Okay, so we've got a lot of processing. You come in, I claim asylum, and you have to hear my claim. So the USCIS adjudicates affirmative asylum applications for aliens who are not in removal proceedings, while immigration judges adjudicate defensive asylum applications for aliens who are in removal proceedings. Okay, so you're here, we're gonna remove you. Wait, no, don't, I'm gonna claim asylum. Okay, we'll interview you and adjudicate this. You're here not yet in removal. You're making kind of an affirmative claim. Before I get removed, I'd like to claim asylum. We got processing. So depending on the alien's immigration status, the government will usually either adjudicate the application or refer it to a judge who will then conduct a new review of the application. This essentially allows an alien to get two chances at this, right? So you come in before you're in removal proceedings, you make a claim. Then you start to get removed, you can make another claim. They're hearing you both times. Now, this new rule allows the government to refer asylum applications to judges without first interviewing the alien. This rule will shorten the total time that it takes asylum officers and judges to adjudicate these things. And among other reasons, we're making this change to reduce the backlog. One guy from USCIS, Director Joseph Edlow, says, "For far too long, the asylum system has been exploited for purposes of delay and work authorization. These are not legitimate claims of protection. And so our system exists to protect individuals who genuinely fear persecution. And this rule will help ensure resources are properly directed and we can close this loophole. Now, one of the greatest barriers to effective immigration enforcement is intentional delay by illegal aliens and open borders lawyers who actually represent them. James Percival said this: "My office works every day with the immigration components of Homeland to improve the efficiency and to fulfill the president's mandate, and the rule would just do that." This rule will go into effect immediately. We'll accept public comments. We'll issue a final rule later. And all of the usual suspects, the pro-immigration lawyers out there who think that every single person from around the world should be able to come here, all the DSA-aligned people who say there should be no borders at all, they're melting down over this rule change, saying it's a violation of due process and whatever. So here's the actual details on this. And they're saying in writing now that Homeland will be amending its regulations. Certain applications can be referred without an interview, and we still offer an interview prior to a grant or denial, but we're removing the requirement that a letter communicating the basis of the asylum include an assessment of the alien's credibility. Okay, so just kind of taking away some of the additional protections that the prior administrations had installed inside. And there's some more details on this that I think will help explain why they're doing this. Homeland is amending its regs. We still will conduct an interview in certain cases or where an interview complies with other requirements. The Asylum Division had a longstanding practice of offering an interview to all aliens who file this form, despite there being no right to an interview or a requirement to conduct one. Okay, so the prior rules were actually overly beneficial. Everybody gets an interview. Everybody gets extra processing. There's no rule that says you have to do that. Through this rule, Homeland is amending regulations to permit certain asylum applications to immigration review without an interview. Homeland is also removing references of a right to an interview. Where'd that come from? You're in the country as a non-citizen and you have a right to a certain process. It's about what the country feels kind enough to give you, and forever it's been way too permissive. Not anymore. So the rule does not impact other interviews for cases where the alien is not barred from applying or receiving asylum or not ineligible on the merits and other methodologies. And the purpose is now to amend the rules. In order to reduce the affirmative asylum backlog, improve efficiency of operations, safeguard national security, and more, we will no longer offer interviews to all affirmative applicants prior to referral for removal. So you come in, you get an interview. Now we're going to put you in removal proceedings. You get another interview. We're just going to skip that. We're going to put you right into removal. You can do your interview there. We need these updates. This change ensures that aliens understand what to expect throughout the affirmative asylum process, and that process does not guarantee them an interview. Explicitly authorizing the government now to refer an asylum application to the immigration review without an interview allows us to more seriously address these backlogs, free up interview slots, determine when an interview is actually needed, and more. And we've got the authority to do that. All of these acts say this is the base level of what must be provided. So we're providing that, but we're not giving them an extra interview. And finally, down here in the summary, we've got the legal framework explaining that all of this is legal and lawful, all of it articulated here. And there are other bars, okay? So there are other bars for asylum. You cannot apply for asylum if you can be removed, if there's other agreements and other justifications for your deportation. And so the rule continues on and on and on. It's about 90 pages in full. So you got to follow the rule. But as it stands, the system is being tightened up to facilitate the expeditious processing. We've got a lot of processing to do. Joe Biden invaded us for 4 years. And so we got to pick up the pace here. Now, here's another representative who is explaining it's time to go. We got to start fresh on this problem, solve it, and restore territorial integrity to the nation. Here's what he had to say.
With you because sources are telling Fox News that ICE is preparing to dramatically ramp up operations to locate and arrest Haitian nationals in the United States that are on temporary protected status. Now, this as the Supreme Court's certified judgment expected to be transmitted to lower courts as soon as today. So that news could break later on this morning, sir. Congressman, your thoughts on this new move by ICE?
What's actually going to happen in Ohio, they're going to start getting the Haitians out in Ohio. You know, I don't understand in this world where illegal isn't a definition. You know, if you're here illegally, you have to go away. You have to come back legally. And it has to happen to everyone. Now, there could be a kinder and gentler way, especially when we're dealing with families, where we could get them in there and see that pathway. But if you're just avoiding the system and you refuse to get into the immigration system, you have to leave. I mean, that's what President Trump got voted for. It's an 80-20 issue. We're not going to move from the path. You know, every time we see an angel mom or some beautiful American child get killed by an illegal, whether it's drunk or more malicious than that, our hearts break. Let's get them out of here. Let's get them all out of here. And let's start from the beginning. Come in legally. We will help you come in legally, not illegally.
All right.
It is why, in large part, the president was reelected. We had 4 years of a full-on border invasion. They lied to us, said that there's nothing they could do about it. We had a bunch of backstabbing Republicans like Senator Langford and others who said we needed to codify that and make sure that we could have, you know, about 5,000 to 8,000 coming across every day before it triggers a follow-up response. And now the effort needs to go in the opposite direction. And fortunately, as we're seeing, status is being canceled. We've got new reforms inside of Homeland that will make that process move much more effectively and efficiently, and we're going to keep our eye on this one. So we'll see what happens here as Homeland prepares for their surge. TPS status now officially coming to a close unless there's a last-minute extension. Time is up. Time to go home and say thank you for us having and hosting you here for the last 15 plus years. Go make Haiti great again. We'll be fine. We'll figure it out. So we'll keep our eye on this stuff and much more. Thank you for joining as we do. All right, we got one more update here, and then we'll hear from you. And this one also is horrendous, courtesy of Joe Biden. And here's an interesting one. Hundreds of thousands of missing kids now being laid at the feet of Xavier Becerra, the guy who's running to be the new governor of California, who definitely does not want this story coming out, to explain what his role was in how this happened. And it turns out he was waiving rules. He was waiving requirements that would vet people who would come to pick up the kids, show up to one of his facilities when he was Biden's HHS director, and just say, we are here for some kids. They would hand them off to you without any checking about who you were or where these kids would be ended up. And now we've got, courtesy of Steve Hilton, his top contender in the California race, a whistleblower who is explaining exactly what happened from the inside, what she saw and how it all went down. But the background here is horrifying. A new scandal. Xavier was Biden's health secretary. And you remember what this guy looks like. We'll listen to him talking about taco vendors because that's what's most important to him. But he was a terrible secretary, did a horrible job with COVID, and then apparently lost hundreds of thousands of kids. Whistleblower now coming forward to expose the horrific level of abuse and exploitation that hundreds of thousands of migrant kids all faced while they were being detained. Caseworker now coming out. She worked at the Popona Fairplex complex, alleges that children faced abuse, chaotic releases, were separated from their siblings, went to unverified addresses, and secretly moved in the dead of night, many of them never to be seen again. The complex also accepted fake documents from the sponsors who came and got these kids that were trafficked by the Bidens. During his time as the health secretary from 21 to 25, there was an overwhelming border crisis with just under 480,000, quote, unaccompanied minors crossing the border. That's like an entire state of people. It's like the state of Wyoming, a little bit less than their population, but one whole state of kids. Homeland was the federal agency that was, Health and Human Services was the federal agency legally mandated to care for and protect unaccompanied migrant children. Multiple emergency intake sites were set up across the border, including Texas, Florida, California, San Diego, Long Beach, Pomona. The whistleblower who brought the allegations to Steve Hilton is a first-generation American and mother of two who moved and sent her family to El Salvador, but she was raised in California. We're going to listen to her. Her shocking claims come as Hilton zeroes in on Becerra's prior term under Biden. Race is not that close. We've got Becerra ahead 61-36 because apparently in California, they love illegal alien, migrant, human trafficking of children. Becerra toured the Fairfax complex in July 21. He said this is a model for other sites across America. But in her 6 months working there, this whistleblower, who we are about to hear from, claims her concerns about what happened were routinely ignored. They had high pressure to reunify minors with sponsors and get them out, even though there was no clear evidence of any connection that the adults had to the kids. So you show up, hi, I'd like a 5-year-old girl. Oh, who are you? Her uncle. Any proof of that? No. Perfect. Here you go. One haunting example from the caseworker involved a 5-year-old girl named Grace who arrived at the Fairplex complex with her 7-year-old sister. Grace was distraught when she couldn't find her sibling, saying, I miss my sister and I don't know where she's at. Caseworker also claimed that a 14-year-old girl got pregnant after being AR'd. She had allegedly been forced into intercourse and work by a woman that was her aunt. Okay, so auntie comes, picks up a kid, and then the aunt shoves this 14-year-old into sex work. When the caseworker demanded to know where Grace's sister was, she was allegedly told the girls had been separated because older children were abusing younger children. And all of this was caused by them. By creating an open border, they incentivized this to happen. This belongs at the feet of every Democrat who endorses an open border. I felt heartbroken because nobody could tell her where her sister was. 7-year-old apparently left the facility first. Grace was then separated and left later. Caseworker also calling the vetting process for sponsors ridiculous, claiming that selfies were accepted as ID. Sponsors were communicating through WhatsApp and their addresses could not even be verified. But because caseworkers were unable to perform welfare checks, she never learned whether the two girls even reached their destination safely at all. These children were trafficked as a direct result of Becerra's personal instruction to eliminate proper vetting of these adults. Hilton also refuted his claims that reports of 85,000 missing migrant children is not accurate. Actually, it's much higher than that. 280,000 kids went missing under Becerra, saying this is despicable, this is disqualifying, saying there were allegations of sexual harassment and abuse. There were 16, 17-year-old boys abusing the females, and said employees who reported all of this were all fired. Workers got inadequate training, children sleeping on cots, very little privacy for any sensitive interviews. Children also woken up at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., handed handbags of belongings, and then just taken away, trafficked out. We have no idea who was going to be transporting the kids. Nobody would see the kids leaving at 2 in the morning. She blames Becerra, saying we failed. He should take responsibility for this. And of course, he never will. So here's the whistleblower, Steve Hilton, sharing the video, confirming that Xavier dismantled vetting to speed up the release. We got too many kids here. Just get them out. I don't care where they're going. Kids were sent to traffickers, abusive workplaces, fake relatives, and the total number of lost were 319,000, but 140,000 of those kids are still missing. More tapes will follow from this one, the Becerra tapes. But here is what this whistleblower had to say.
When you're trying to help and you realize that you've been fooled and you've been used to traffic children, it's heartbreaking.
Secretary Becerra pressured the Office of Refugee Resettlement to speed up sponsor transfers for unaccompanied alien children, going so far as to say, if Henry Ford
had seen this in his plan, he would have never become famous and rich. This is not the way you do an assembly line.
What was the unaccompanied children program for those who are not familiar?
Migrant children that were crossing the borders that came unaccompanied with no parents were being sent to 3 different places here in California. When the minors came into the facilities, we would find out where they were going. They were detained there until whoever were claiming these kids were vetted. However, the vetting was not proper. So we were sending children to multiple addresses. We were sending children to the same addresses on multiple locations. I mean, it was a complete joke.
So a child crosses the border without any parents or guardians. They're just alone. They're brought to a facility like the one you were at. The child needs to be placed with a sponsor who could be a parent or guardian, or it could be somebody totally unrelated. But somehow or another, you need to do a vetting process to figure out, is this sponsor actually the person that they claim to be? Could you explain what that vetting process was like?
They were coming with marks of Sharpie on their arms saying, I'm going to this address, or I am this age and I am going here. Please call. And then they would have a number. At times they knew, but then they didn't know. For instance, I'm going to see my Aunt Mary, but I've never seen my Aunt Mary. I've only met her through the phone, that type of thing. Then we would call the sponsor and say something like, hi, my name is so-and-so. Are you expecting a minor? And then we would give the name, and then they would say yes. Sometimes they didn't even know the name of the child. We would ask for their address. A lot of these people did not have proof. We still have no proof that the child went to that address because we couldn't do any follow-up or continue with the case or see welfare checks. We were not allowed to do that either.
Was there any sort of checking of identification of these sponsors?
The checking of the IDs were none. We would get IDs that you can tell they had been falsified. These pictures were like selfie pictures. So we knew they were fake IDs. However, we had to take them. So I saw a lot of the fake IDs, the fake documentations, the fake birth certificates. I saw it all. I was telling them, hey, this ID looks fake. What I was told was, well, you're not a professional investigator. Your job is to reunify the child to the sponsor, not to investigate the sponsor of the minor. Taking documentation with people sending selfies is not vetting properly. Not being able to talk or see the sponsor is not proper vetting. Using a WhatsApp to talk to these sponsors is not vetting properly. We were constantly getting information that was false, and we were supposed to go with it.
I suppose it goes without saying, but it was the case that children were sent to sponsors who provided a fraudulent form of identification?
Yes. Yes. A lot of these things would have been avoided, but the fact that they weren't, it's heartbreaking to see that a child doesn't get to have his limb because he's lost it. It's heartbreaking to hear that a child is being forced to sleep with different men because the so-called aunt who was her sponsor is making her sleep with men. None of that would have happened if we would have protected these children, but we failed.
Yeah, and it's horrifying. It's a mass child trafficking operation that was facilitated by the Biden administration, our own government. They will lecture everybody about, we need migrants here or we can't solve this problem. Meanwhile, they set up an environment that created this problem. All of this could have been avoided if the border was closed. We wouldn't have a surplus of 500,000 kids who are here unaccompanied and then being shoveled out the door as quickly as possible to anybody who will show up and take them. And the aftermath of this still hasn't been fleshed out. We don't know where apparently 100,000 plus kids have ended up. Large percentages, much higher than zero, I would imagine, are in really dire conditions. And the open border people, the ones who will lecture everybody about being humanitarian and wanting to create a stronger America, created this problem, and no one is being held accountable for it. And in California, sounds like they're on the verge of electing Xavier Becerra, the guy responsible for this. So disgusting. We pray for those kids and hope that there is justice that is delivered on their behalf. But here's what Becerra is talking about while he's running for governor out there.
Whether you are new to our state and visiting, and we hope you do spend some money, and if you're going to buy a street taco, buy a real street taco, not something from one of these, I'll leave it at that. All I know is that there's real food in California, and there are real street tacos, and you don't get them in some establishment that's been around for a long time. You get it on the street from the guy who's been making it for a long time.
Yeah, so that's what he's worried about. While he caused hundreds of thousands of kids to go bye-bye and to be trafficked into the arms of abusers, he's talking about street tacos because he knows who his constituency is and what they really care about out there in California. So, sick person. Hopefully the Californians wake up and realize that they're about to elect somebody who facilitated a problem on a scale, 1,000, 10,000 times worse than anything Epstein did. But as long as they are sold this bill of goods, that they're doing it for the benefits of, migrants or whatever, they'll continue to keep their heads buried in the sand while this darkness continues to persist inside of their party. So we'll keep our eye on this. Hopefully this story spreads around there like wildfire. Maybe that was a bad analogy because it's California, but that the people wake up and realize these people are selling them a bill of goods and kids are getting harmed, and we could have better leadership at the helm. So we'll keep our eye on this one. Thank you for joining and subscribing as we do. All right, friends, it has been a beautiful stream today. Thank you for joining us as we went through all of the Fauci stuff, and even some of Fauci's allies are squirming and looking a little bit awkward out there. Rand saying that if Fauci lies again, he's not going to be covered by the pardon. And we saw a bunch of Fauci's lies on full display here today and saw more details about what was inside his diary that was published by Rand. And so a lot more to come on that this week. Then we saw that Homeland is now surging resources to deport the Haitians now that their TPS status is coming to a close. And they're also reinforcing some rules changes in the processing of asylum applications, saying we're not going to give you multiple at-bats in order to secure your position here. You only get one, and we're going to accelerate the process, and that's what you're entitled to under the law. And so we're happy to see that as well. And then lastly, we saw that Becerra and his campaign now having to deal with new allegations that he trafficked and lost hundreds of thousands of kids in order to placate the open borders, pro-immigration lobbies that exist here in America. But now, my friends, it is time to hear from you. Thank you for being here. Happy Monday. Hopefully your week is off to an incredible start. We had a really wonderful interview this morning on our members only morning stream, where we had Dr. Janice Johnston, who joined us. And you know who she is. She's amazing. She was the vice chair of the Georgia State Election Board. And we covered a lot of her work here over the years. She was one of the people kind of in the center of the videos out there in Georgia, fielding complaints from many people who saw a ton of fraud in the Georgia elections. She came on this morning, and it was great. We talked for about an hour, over an hour, about all the details, all the problems. She's amazing. So we'll have that video coming out. But if you want to join us for some of these live interviews, we'd love to have you as a member, and we'd love to see you tomorrow on the members only morning stream. Although we don't have an interview lined up tomorrow, but we have more and more of them coming, and your boy is assembling them as we speak. So thank you for joining. Thanks for considering becoming a member, and we'll see you tomorrow morning. But we also had some great comments today. Man, thank you for sending these in. We got some really nice comments today. Thank you. Hey, Flipping Through. What's up, Flipping Through? 15 months as a member. Says, great job. Thank you, Flipping Through. Was that from this morning? I think that was from this morning. Yes, it was. Yeah, and Dark Rogue. I think we covered that one too this morning. Yeah, amazing. We had a great chat this morning. So thank you for saying that, Flipping Through. Sorry, I missed that this morning. Hey, and thank you for being here for 15 months. We got Fauci. Let's pretend I haven't seen that from Fauci. And I don't know what he's laughing at because he's responsible for the death of hundreds of thousands or millions. Hey, what's up, Bodie? Charlie Gouveia? Charlie Gouveia? Not a bad name. It doesn't have the same heft as like Genghis Gouveia or like Harambe Agamemnon Gouveia, but Charlie's not bad. It's pretty good. We'll throw it in the mix. Jack Mack, hey, that's cute how they pretend like they don't know what he's talking about. We all know what Fauci did. The lying and gaslighting is next level sometimes. It's over the top. It's like overacting. Thank you for everything you've contributed to America, Dr. Fauci. You're so incredible. You guys even thinking, is this just a script? Are you getting paid to say this? Is this mandatory? Like, what are you doing? Are you even using any of your, IQ points at all? What's going on, Jack Mack? Good to see you. Thank you for the dono. Hey, Dark Rogue. What's up, Dark Rogue? Look at these 20 new friends joining us. Amazing. Can't wait to see everybody this morning. And if you're a new member, grab the interview from this morning. It was great. Fernando, Leonardo, ZMC, what's up? Matthew Larkin, we got My Name Is. Jason is here. We got Blessed Mama. C, what's up, Blessed Mama? Joanna O'Brien, Lucas Brown, Pat Shepard, what's up? 12 Gauge Bow. We got Don Only. Digital Lee, Militis Templey is here. Jaeger, what's up? Mr. Rich, John Bon Zombie is here. Psychology, Pog Slayer, Just Me, what's up? Smoke Some, and something Teacup in the house. Gifted memberships courtesy of Dark Rogue OG. Thank you, Dark Rogue, for being so generous, bringing in some new friends, and for sending in some more super chats today. Dark Rogue asking over under of Fauci going in there and admits to everything, knowing he has the pardon protecting him. Yeah, I think I would take the under on that. I think Fauci's going to, I think he'll talk. So I don't think he's just going to sit there and plead the fifth. I think if he did that, that would open him up to an obstruction charge because he's already pardoned for the conduct that is the subject of the questions. Will Congress hit him with an obstruction charge or make a criminal referral if he doesn't answer anything? I don't think that they would, but I still think that he wouldn't just plead the fifth. Maybe he does on some questions, but I don't think so. I think he'll talk, but I think he'll try to keep a consistent story. But I understand your point. I mean, that would be pretty interesting if he's like, okay, I know you've got all of these other emails. In those emails, I was saying this, that, and the other thing. So if Rand asks him a question, he'll probably just do the lawyerly thing, right? And say, well, that's your interpretation is this, my interpretation is that. And so he'll duke it out on the merits on each one of these questions. And then just like Jack Smith did, right? If he gets hit with like a false testimony charge, he'll try to language his way out of it to say, oh, well, I thought I was answering this question. You were asking me about toll records. And so I was answering about toll records. I wasn't answering about the broad question about whether I was creating gain of function. Like he's got a reputation that I think he wants to maintain. And he's got this history of really, really kind of being a sociopath, as we've seen in his emails. Say one thing to the public, do something else behind closed doors. And I think he'll try to thread the needle and just say none of it is inconsistent. None of it's a lie. And so it should be very interesting. It should be very interesting, which is why we're excited to see what happens on Wednesday. Hey, it's Viva. What's up, Viva? Good to see you, my friend. Viva and friends, welcome aboard. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Viva, for raiding the stream. Hopefully you had a great stream today. Viva's out there duking it out on X, man. We've been watching and observing, doing some good work out there, fighting for his positions. So Viva, thank you for that. Shout out to our Viva friends. Dark Rogue, what's up? Hey, another one. Millions died from COVID in 2021, but no one died from the flu that year. Yeah, we noticed that. You saw those charts kind of invert. Every year you have the flu spike, kind of like a heartbeat. But then we saw a lot of that seem to be replaced by the COVID numbers. So the flu was not really existent, but COVID was everywhere. So how'd that happen? Very strange. Very strange. Thank you, Dark Rogue, for that. Yeah, we'll see what Fauci says. Blonde Butterfly. No, thank you for your service, Robert. Thank you, Blonde Butterfly. It's just we appreciate that. Thank you for saying that. It's a real honor to be here. Thank you for joining us and going through these stories. We think these are very important components of America and self-governance. So we're just grateful you're here. And thank you for your support today. Hey, Tom Jewett. What's up, Tom? Put Fauci in jail. We're trying to, man. We're trying to. That's why I think this is going to be so consequential, because this is new conduct. If he lies now, it's not covered by the pardon. And so maybe that opens up something. I think he should be prosecuted and he can bring the pardon in as his defense. But somebody needs to do that, and I'm not sure if the DOJ will. What's going on? Hey, J.R. Holmes is here. Welcome aboard, J.R. Holmes. Thanks for signing up. You're going to love the interview from this morning, especially if you're interested in any election integrity conversations. Dr. Johnson is amazing. And she gave us the rundown today. It was great. Hey, Schlista, can't we sue Fauci civilly? Yeah, I think you could. He was a government employee. Okay, so that kind of gives him a second layer of immunity for actions in his government employ, right? You have qualified immunity. If you're a government official, you've got immunity without a pardon anyways. You could sue, but he's going to have some protections because he willfully lied to the American people, which was used to ban people on social media and shun them publicly. So then again, he would say there's no causation there. Like, I was doing what I was doing. I didn't cause the social media companies to ban you. That was their own. So in other words, it would cut off liability because he would just point the causation to them, not to him. But I get your point. The emotional stress and anxiety he caused by his lies, like an intentional infliction of emotional distress claim, he should be held financially responsible. At the very least. But he's got layers of protection. He's got government employer protection with qualified immunity. He's got criminal pardon immunity and privilege, which is so strange for a guy who did nothing wrong, isn't it? But again, I would rather see some progression on that. He can bring the pardon into court and defend himself. Hey, what's up, Joe? Hey, just found out today my wife and I are having a baby girl. Any advice? Kind of freaking out. Not really. So we don't know what we're having, and the baby's going to come at any moment. And so your boy is also kind of freaking out. So I don't know. Do you have any advice for me? But hey, man, congratulations. What a beautiful experience. I have found that, watching my wife grow this baby has been just really a profound experience in a way that I didn't realize it was going to be. Watching her body change, watching and feeling this little creature inside has given me just new perspective. Like, I already was very appreciative of our mothers out there. Like, we love our mothers, but to watch kind of what happens and what they go through has just been really, really amazing. So, I would just say if I had any advice, it's to be as present as you can and to be as supportive as you can. Try to go to all the appointments. You'll learn a lot by being there. Take notes, ask questions, write things down. Get ready to have a bunch of baby stuff at your house. So make sure you have some room for that, just kind of transition there. But to be perfectly honest with you, I'm also kind of freaking out. Our baby's supposed to be coming any day now. So we're in it together, my man. Congratulations to you and your beautiful wife. What an awesome thing that is. And thank you for sharing that with us. I'm excited for you guys. Hey, Rick D, the injunction stopping the release of the Biden tapes has been dissolved by the court. We were waiting for that. Yeah, so our friends at Oversight, we've had interviews here recently with Jeff Clark, who's awesome, and with Mike Howell. They're both at Oversight Project now. Huge victory for them. And so presumably they're going to get their hands on these Biden audio tapes that will be released. And we're looking forward to seeing what those are as well. So Rick D, thank you for sharing that, Rick. Good to see you. And it should be very good. Yeah, those are the Zwanitzer tapes from 2017, which may show that Biden's brain was broken well before 2020 even got underway. And if you don't have capacity back in 17, how do you have capacity in 2020? And should all of his executive orders be invalidated and his Supreme Court appointments too? The Savage, what's up? Hey, I'm fairly certain that the current cyclospora outbreak is due to Fauci on their lettuce, not feces. Well, that is true. Yeah, Fauci is essentially a parasite in many ways. He's a good analogy to a parasite. And he does resemble, when he speaks, explosive diarrhea, which is, I think, really the root cause of, or the root effect of cyclospora. So that's a fair logical conclusion. The science seems to validate that. Thank you to Savage for the donation. Hey, what's up, Rob? Rob, I love the title. You stole it from the MSM. It's a bombshell, talking heads. It's a bombshell. It's a bombshell drilled into everyone. Well, yeah, we got to spice things up a little bit. Like I need you to say, wow, I need you to click the videos, really. Hey, what's going on over there? It's a bombshell. We try not to be too over aggressive with those, but it is a bombshell. I think his diary coming out, I'm sure he is not happy about that and really wishes he wouldn't have sent those things to himself. But thank you, Rob, for the noticing. Hey, Baby Lewis, how about a class action lawsuit against the media? Well, they're going to have the First Amendment, right? They're going to say we weren't lying. We were providing news and adding opinion commentary over it. We weren't doing anything malicious. We weren't committing fraud, right? Rising to some other level that's not just speech. But I like the ideas, man. I'm for justice. It's just how do we get there? Which is why I think that this interview between Rand and Fauci will be a good development and a potential opening for justice. Hey, Michelle, I'm so done with the COVID crap. My darling husband brought the original version home in January 2020 from a deployment. Yeah, the kids got sick, but as a mom, I would pick COVID over a stomach virus. From Michelle. Well, I think many people has had that same experience. Like I never got COVID actually, and we never got it. I got very sick that year, and we were like trying to live stream, but it was like a head cold. Like I kind of lost my voice for a week. You guys may remember that back during 20. I came on here, I'm like I can't talk, but it wasn't COVID. I got tested a bunch of times, so I don't even know what it feels like. Right? I don't even know what COVID feels like, but I did know other people that said they got it. It was like nothing. Some people were like debilitatingly sick, but others just like lost their sense of smell for a few days and then they were perfectly fine. So I can understand that analogy. And a stomach virus where you're, having explosive diarrhea like the other one, that's a whole different can of worms there. But we're glad that you guys made it through. I know a lot of people had a really tough time with COVID. My brother Joey was in the hospital with COVID. Joey, my brother, has Down syndrome, so my family got hit hard by it. But he's got Down syndrome. He's got very complex mechanics going on in his body. And he got very, very sick. He was in the hospital for almost 2 months. And that was a very painful time for our family, which is why I'm so sick of what these people did in engineering this thing and then lying to everybody about it. Then my mom went in there. She was, I think, in the hospital with Joey for 43 days. And then she got COVID. And I'm here sitting outside. We're totally quarantined, so I couldn't even get in to see them. I'm dropping off food every day, dropping off, drinks and things every day outside the hospital. They would never let us go in. And I thought I was going to lose literally my mom and my brother, like in one fell swoop. I was sick over it. So, I wouldn't wish that coming back on anybody. And I know a lot of people actually did lose people. We lost some people in our family, but, kind of extended family, but it was a real sick time. And that was back in 2020. Like that was during the bad COVID before it sort of, tapered down in virality. So not good, man. And the people who engineered this thing and covered it up and got rich off of it and sold books and got media magazine covers and all the things need to be held accountable for what they've done. Baby Lewis, my mother kept getting the boosters, diagnosed with liver cancer. Months later, sick, took her to the ER. Her liver was fully dead months later. Man, I'm so sorry to hear that, Baby Lewis. Yeah, so sorry to hear that. Yeah, and a lot of that's going on. I think, some people, went through COVID, got jabs, then got cancer in the immediate aftermath of that. People are saying maybe there's a correlation there. I don't know, but it's concerning. Mosheg, hey, back then I saw an AFD at a dialysis clinic in Israel, an ad for the jab saying it was 96% effective and laughed at it. Yeah, I know. I was doing the same thing. They started much higher than that, right? Like Walensky from CDC, she came out and said, if you take this, you will not get it. If you take this, you will not transmit it. And I swear, I went to lunch with a friend of mine and she says, oh yeah, my husband and I got it. And then the next week we both came down with COVID. Our whole family caught it. So what? What are you talking about? She's like, yeah, it's the weirdest thing. And I was like, do you think maybe it gave it to you? She's like, well, I don't know. Maybe it did. She's like, maybe. It's like, all right, this is weird. And that was pretty early on in the process. Chris Kinsey, she was like, a lot of these people were first at the gate to get that thing. Chris Kinsey, COVID in 1984, 229E, human coronavirus, was a common cold from the 1960s, but I like the 4 Roman numerals, CDIV. 404 error is a computer virus. Gotta love that one. Yeah, well, that's like 404 is web page is down, right? You can't see it doesn't connect, like the page is not loading. Interesting comment there, Chris. And it's in 1984. They talk about the human coronavirus. I've not read that book in years. Since I was like a teenager, maybe even early, like grade school. Hey, Nathan, who had the deadliest jab? Amazing. So we got Tyson, we got Muhammad Ali. Who's that? I don't know who that is. Is that Sugar Ray Leonard? Or it's Fauci. Well, Fauci will just jab you as many times as he can, and it's mandatory. Like, you have to take it, if you want to be in the Biden military. You got to get jabbed right in the neck or wherever. Wild. So thank you for that. Who is this other dude here? Who is that? Someone help me out. Hey, Danny Murphy, another great interview, amigo. Loved her. Thank you, Danny. Yeah, she was great. Dr. Janice Johnston. She's awesome. She knows the insides and outs of the election stuff. I thought we were pretty good. We've been covering it for years now. Joe Frazier. That looks right. But man, she's like a pro. She's like been living and breathing this stuff for 4 years. So she's amazing. So thank you, Danny. Thanks for being a member and checking that out. Hey, Rick D. ROFL. Senator Paul just posted this Fauci pic on his X account. Oh, that's great. All right. So that's Fauci writing in his Dear Diary, Fauci's diary. Rand hates this dude, and I love it so much because so do I. So Saved by the Bell, back in the background. Yeah, it's a great show. I used to watch some of that. Other things, The Babysitters Club. That's so great. So Fauci just writing away, everybody likes me. I'm so popular. Jake Tapper sent me an email, and I went and had dinner at his house. Like, oh, gosh. Yeah, that sounds about right. That's why things were so ridiculous. Hey, what's up? I'm P. Picking Cute. Think Tapper's going to write another fantastic novel on how bad he was fooled by Fauci? Yeah, right. Can't wait to see those channels eating crow. Doubt they'll report a thing. He finally got what he's been after since AIDS and destroyed it. Epitome of power hungry from I'm P. Picking Cute. I don't think so. We've had no real remorse or apologies from anybody who was selling all of this stuff. They've just moved on like nothing happened because they're cowards and they'll take no ownership for their mistakes. Hey, thank you for sending these in. Yeah, so on YouTube, we activated, I think it's called a GIFs feature. YouTube emailed us and said, turn this on. We said, okay, yes, ma'am. So we did. And so Deported sent a chili in. Amazing. And Gina Hansen sent a gold coin in. Amazing. Thank you, guys. Christine, what's up? Stand for nothing. You'll fall for anything. That's true. Yeah, you just become a malleable object that just bends with the wind. And what kind of existence is that? A terrible one. Hey, Christine, I thought Jim Jordan had Fauci cover-up emails in 2020 or 2022. Yeah, probably did. There's been a lot, of COVID drops. I feel like these from Rand are new, though, especially the diary. I don't think we've ever covered any of Fauci's diary stuff, but I think Rand has been digging into this for years and is now, bundling all these things up and doing the slow drip, drip, drip. So we may get even more good stuff tomorrow on this as we inch closer to the interview. But thank you, Christine. And I know that there's been a lot of cover up. House has been looking into it. Ron Johnson was looking into it. Didn't we have a COVID subcommittee that was releasing stuff? We've covered a lot of it here. We were covering so much of it in 2020 that people started to get sick of it, man. And I understand that completely. We had a conversation about it. Like, Rob, enough with the COVID, you're going nuts. I'm like, I am going nuts. I was going nuts. Dark Rogue. Okay, so no there in the Ryan Mears story I sent you. I understand you were busy, my friend. So Dark Rogue, to be honest, I haven't looked at it yet. Thank you for sending that. I do have your messages on X. I just hadn't looked at it. Normally we try to kind of follow the big stories on the day. Haven't seen that one, but maybe we can hit that tomorrow morning. So thanks again for the reminder on it. Thanks for sending it over. Ryan Mears is a prosecutor. I believe the prosecutor, or it's a story about a prosecutor who's in some trouble. So we always like bad prosecutors to talk about. So thank you, Dark Rogue, for that. Lou, hey, thanks for all you do. I truly admire you and Alexis. Lou, happy 2-year anniversary to us. What a nice thing to say. Thank you for that. Alexis I definitely understand that. She's a very admirable person. Me, kind of a piece of work sometimes. But thank you, Lou, for the nice compliment, my man. And thank you for being here for 24 months. That's a long time. And I'm grateful that we've been able to go through so much together. Hey, Biltong is here. What's up, King of Biltong? Skip the gas station junk food while you're traveling. Pack Biltong from Biltong, USA. It's clean, protein-packed, grass-fed, air-dried beef with great flavor. You can go to BiltongUSA.com. Use code Robert. You'll save 10% off and get your meats. Hey, weekend in Vegas. Did Ilhan marry her sister to give her status? Well, no, I think she's gone. Weekend in Vegas. Didn't she go back to Somalia? So I don't know. According to her website, we just covered the Ilhan story on Saturday. All the connections. Ilhan is way closer to the fraud than she's ever let on. Her sister was involved in it, and there was cash being funneled from Ilhan to her sister. I think her sister is now back in Somalia, if we read that right. So I don't know if she has status, since she probably made millions of dollars and, mission accomplished. Why does she need to stick around? Just go back home. Not a Fed. Hey, sickening that it took this long for the whistleblower to come forward. Is it only because Xavier is running for governor? Probably. Yeah, probably. You start to see people emerge out of the woodwork when it looks like somebody's going to ascend to power. Even more sickening is why nobody else has or is speaking up. Can't wait for Wednesday for Fauci. I fully expect another strongly worded letter when he pleads the fifth. Yeah, people are wondering about that. What will he do? Will he invoke or will he answer some questions? I think he'll answer questions, if I had to guess. The right thing to do would be to just plead the fifth. Just say, I'm not answering any of this crap. This is a politicized retribution witch hunt. I've already answered these questions. The downside would be it opens him up to obstruction charges because he's already been pardoned for the content of those questions and answers. But is he going to get prosecuted for obstruction by the DOJ? I doubt it. So, and he may not, even if he lies, because nobody's been charged for lying to Congress, as far as we know. So, LZ, thank you for that. And Not a Fed, thank you for that. Yeah, when people start to run, then people start to talk out, especially in California. You see, that's the same pattern. Bang Bang Swalwell was apparently, doing some bad things with some women, like non-agreement type of things. And then they started to talk out about him once he became no longer politically viable. Or they wanted to remove him because he was too politically viable. LZ, we all knew Fauci was a criminal as soon as he got a blanket pardon from Biden. Yeah, 100%. Why else would he need a pardon? And why would that pardon go back to 2014? Why does it need to encompass all of that other action? Well, because that's when he was signing the contracts and facilitating the creation of gain-of-function research and shipping it over to China. So, yeah, it's exactly right. They were trying to immunize him from his bad acts. Hey, Cat Zap. 50 months, Cat Zap. That's a long time. Whew. Like a whole different person. HRC has all the Haitian humanitarian cash saved up. 100%. Remember that story? She was like funneling money, I think, through the Clinton Foundation to go rebuild Haiti. It was like hundreds of millions of dollars that they gobbled up. I think the Haitians are mad at them. So she can go facilitate that. Send Hillary and Bill back on the same planes as the TPS Haitians, and they can help them rebuild. Thank you, Cat Zap. Thanks for being here for 50 months. That's amazing. Hey, love Legos. Rob, do you have a plan if your wife goes into labor during your live streams? Not really. No, not really. I think it'll depend on, the nature of what's happening. Like if her mom runs down and is like, her water broke, we're going to have to call it short, But no, no, I haven't thought about that. Exactly. Thank you for the question. I probably should think about that. Thank you, Love Legos. But, very likely, depending on what's going on, we'll have to end the show, because we got a baby coming, man. So, or not. Maybe we just come down and just say, hey, how you feeling? We can do an interview. How you feeling, baby? Okay, we can test the contractions together. Time the contractions out. They're not called contractions. They're called surges. It's a more positive innuendo. All right, so thank you for the question. Love Legos. Hey, Christine Doer, what's going on? My mom passed 6 months ago from the jab? Question. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Christine Doer. I'm interpreting that as your mom did pass 6 months ago, and it's not a question, is how I'm interpreting that. And I'm sorry to hear that. And I don't know if it's, a question about somebody else's comment or if that is your mom who actually did pass, but I'm sorry to hear that if she did pass. Terrible. Cuckoo's Cam. Hey, 45 months, Cuckoo's Cam. That's a lot, man. Thank you for that. 45 months, that's multiple babies, a lot, multiples of 9 in there. Thank you, Rob, for always being awesome. Man, thank you, Cuckoos. A really nice thing to say. You know, sometimes we try and don't deliver, but we really appreciate you being here for so long because we've got a country to save, man, and I appreciate your joining us in that journey. Really, thank you for being here for so long. Rick D, what's up? Hey, shared this one from Salty Goat. Oh yeah, Mamdani stuff. Recent audit of 1 million voters in Mamdani's elections shows that there were problems. We're going to have some good election updates tomorrow. I can feel that in our bones. 7% were non-existent in records, 6% with fake social numbers, 10% not living in New York City. That could be 230,000 illegal votes, which exceeds the margin of victory. Would have guessed. Who would have guessed, right? Yeah, and we've got some like deadlines coming up. So the New Jersey demand letter that Harmeet Dillon sent into Mikey Sherrill was giving them a 5-day deadline to respond with answers, I think, on the various questions that were proposed to them. So we're going to have some good election stuff, I think, this week also percolating. And every day we get closer to the midterms, we're going to see more of it. So Journal, what's up? Hey, Journal, thank you for the floating heart. What a beautiful gift that is. Thank you for sending that. Spuds, hey, you got some biltong. Spuds got your biltong. Got mine this week. The chocolate bars are amazing. They sell chocolate bars over there? That's incredible. Shout out to King of Biltong. BiltongUSA.com. Get yours. Use code Robert. You'll get some chocolate too. Hey, Sharpie guy. Rob, as always, very well done today. It's a boy, John Gage Gouveia. Yeah. Be blessed, y'all. We're all as excited as if it is one of our own. The day in our lives when we know we're growing up. Congratulations, Alexis and Rob, coming soon to your living room TV. LOL. So happy for you guys. Please keep us in the loop. Hugs all around, watchers and Rob and Alexis. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. We might, I mean, what if she just walks down here and she's like, oh, here's your child. Here, I did it. I took care of it. Whoa. You know, I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to, really, like our official baby due date is today. That was the official day. So don't have a child yet, but man, it should be coming any day now. And we're ready. We're definitely ready. I'm talking to this little baby. I'm saying, it's great out here. It's not scary. We got everything you need. You're going to love it. It's going to be maybe a little bit uncomfortable and weird at first, but it's fine. Just come on out. You're good. You're big enough, you know, so we'll see. It's not listening, obviously, but we'll see if it does. Hey, John. John says baby's coming tomorrow. John, 48 months as a member too, my man. Thank you for that. John, thank you for being around for so long. We really appreciate you. John brings a lot of energy to everything that goes on. Thank you, John. Hey, get a good night's sleep tonight because John says that baby's coming tomorrow. And I hope you're right, John. It should be a good one. It should be a good one. But I'm just going to keep encouraging that little creature to come on out of there. You know, it's warm out here. It's nice. It's summertime. It's not scary at all. I know it's comfortable in there and you probably want to stay in there forever, but it's good out here too. You're going to see. It's going to be great. So, hey, Jim, thank you, Jim. Jim Tells You, we're going to send you over on YouTube. If you're here, send you over to Jim Tells You for another stream to keep on carrying on the fun. And then we'll come back tomorrow, my friends. We'll get into it all again, and we're looking forward to that. So let's see. We got any other comments, and then we'll close it out on the evening. We've got Dan, Maricopa County unofficial turnout 2026 primaries. And yeah, this morning, Dr. Janice was explaining that in Fulton County, or one of the counties out there, Gwinnett maybe, they have something like 114% registration over total population, which is crazy because that number is actually massive. And she explained it to me like I'm 5. But it was very clear that most voter registration rates are like 70 to 80% of total population. So you've got 100,000 people, 70 to 80,000 of those people will be actually registered. But in Georgia, it's like 114,000 people in some counties are registered when the population is only 100,000. How does that work? Very strange. Mom of many, what's the point in proving we were right all along if Fauci never gets arrested? criminally charged or civilly sued. Dude just proved he's a sociopath, so I'm going to advocate for no hope of parole, likely to no avail. I'm so frustrated by the lack of accountability. Man, I feel you on that, Mama Minnie. Truth is, we do have to set the record straight and anchor the truth in. And if Fauci, has his reputation, match reality, which is that he was really a prime operator behind the creation of this thing. Then he was a part of the cover-up of the investigation of the thing. Then he lied through his teeth about the thing. Then that, I think, is a moral victory that needs to anchor into the ages. And that's a truth that can pass from generation to generation for the foreseeable future. It's not as good as prison. I get it. But part of the process that we're going through right now is to bring him back in to see if he'll commit a new crime, and then we can prosecute him accordingly. So that is a good development, even though you would expect that much larger portions of the country and a lot more energy from our Congress and our elected officials would be in that vein, would be more interested in actual repercussions for the people who unleash this thing across the planet. Walk it off, what's up? Hey, the whole divide and conquer concept is suspect re-immigration. Then consider these acts under Biden with open borders. Crazy. Yeah, well, I think Joe Biden wanted to literally change the demographics of the country. And you bring in 25 million people in one generation when they all have babies. Now you've got 25 million plus new citizens who are born to them who will then be interested in voting for policies that open the border up, and there'll be illegal alien adjacent children, right? And that's going to change the whole nation. Washington warned about that. Hey, Michael Swisher, here's an Iran post. You can't force a people to accept Western ideals and democracy. True. That's why trying to convert Afghanistan to a modern nation was doomed to failure. Yeah, what's going on over there? It's still Afghanistan. Same reason you can't just import the third world into your nation and expect them to adopt Western democracy and ideals. Yeah, and they're not even being encouraged to do that. Like this concept of a melting pot, which is not really what you want at all. Why do you want to take a pure piece of gold and pervert it and put it in a pot and melt it with a bunch of other less pure metals? And then you get, like a crap mixture of metal. You don't want that. You want, and that's not, to minimize other people and other values and other cultures and other societies. I'm just saying that they're not in alignment with America's. If they were in alignment with America's, then you would see those values emerge in their societies from which they're coming. And they're not. So you don't actually want diversity, because then you have a diversity of liberty. Some people have a different belief. Some people don't even want liberty. Some people want a type of governance where you can actually speak because they find it offensive. And so we got to deal with that. But even these people that are coming in, they're not encouraging that. They're actually saying that you are right and the native people of America are wrong. Your foreign flags are good. You're here reconquering stolen land. And so the idea of assimilation is not even on the table. They're not even contemplating that. It's just you're here because you deserve to be here. So walk it off. They deliberately halted and took down parts of the border wall. Yes, they did. And Londo, the problem with bombshells in a movie clip from Hot Fuzz, which I'm sure is perfectly appropriate and hilarious, Londo. Thank you for sending that one in. Yep. Friends, it's been a beautiful day. And thank you for joining us on the stream. Let's see if we've got any other comments on the day from our X account. Hey, NeuroD's in the house. What's up, NeuroD? Thank you for sharing watchingthewatchers.locals.com. If you care to join us on tomorrow's members only stream in the morning, or to grab the interview from this morning, that's one place to go. You can also join up on YouTube, and we'll see you there. Hey, Goddess of Truth, very unhappy with Fauci and saying there needs to be justice. Thank you, Goddess of Truth. Very aggressive on that. Hey, CR Citizen in Federalist 74. Hamilton infers that the purpose of the pardon power of the executive is to moderate the extremes of justice. This authority does not extend as a preemption of justice and cannot make anyone immune to any crime before it has been committed or charged. From CR Citizen. So in other words, the preemptive pardon of Fauci is not in alignment with the true pardon power that was contemplated by the founders, and so therefore it should be invalidated. You should only be able to be pardoned after you've already been prosecuted. Dan, all those street tacos made it unsanitary. Yeah, so he wants you to go get illegal alien food from their street tacos. And street tacos can hit, by the way. Like they can hit, they can be pretty dang good. Or they can give you massive diarrhea. So, it's kind of a gamble. So if tested, they would fail the health department. They're probably also not paying their taxes, probably also not licensed. They're also permitted appropriately. Dan, there were instances with these street food stands with people relieving themselves in bushes, then going back to continue making food. Yeah. Well, sounds very Xavier Becerra. Sounds like his style. Crapping all over the place. In this case, America. So, sounds good. All right, so friends, we'll pause here on the day. It has been a beautiful stream. We're going to be coming back tomorrow, and we'll get into it again. We're going to have a great week ahead. Might even have a baby coming out soon, so we'll see. But friends, thanks for joining us. I want to thank our amazing mods and meme smiths. Big thank yous go out to John. We got Muffin Rando. We got Donut Mind Me. Thank you to K Bean. Of course, we saw Neuro D. We got Janek and Dog Digger with our friends over on Rumble. Thanks for watching over there. Geegum Geegum, Elliot, and just Rhonda modding the fort down for us, keeping things nice and orderly around here. And it has been a beautiful stream. And so thank you for joining us. Thank you for subscribing on the way out. Thank you for liking the video. Thanks for sharing the show with a friend or family member. And then thank you for returning back here tomorrow, because we will be back here. We're going to have even more good stuff, even better stuff to talk about. And in order to do that appropriately, we need to see you right back here so that together, with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Make it a beautiful night. Sleep very, very well. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.
My beautiful friends, now it's that time where the stream must end. You brought the heat with every chatting line. Together we expose corruption. One more time we dove in the truth where the media hides. Lit up the lies with receipts on all sides. The fight isn't over, but we made them sweat. We ain't done yet, no, not just yet. Because together we are watching the watchers. Truth on our side. Watching the watchers. We won't be denied. Watching the watchers. Eyes open wide. Fighting for freedom with nothing to hide. Drop a like and don't forget to share. And bring a friend who's ready to care. Tomorrow's lies are just today's news, but here we see through the scripted ruse. Together we are watching the watchers shine in the light. Watching the watchers defending what's right. Watching the watchers each night, together in liberty, holding the